Marek, Guardians of Hades Romance Series, Book 4, written by Felicity Heaton, narrated by Eric G. Dove. Chapter 28. Marek checked Katerina over for what felt like the millionth time as she stood in the kitchen of the castle reciting the plan for Karis, because apparently his brother wouldn't be satisfied until they had gone over it at least 100 times. Whenever Katerina got to the part about being taken by the Wraith, his gut churned and his pulse picked up, adrenaline flooding his veins in preparation for a fight he knew he couldn't let happen. As much as he hated it, he had to let the Wraith take her. He had to trust that she would be able to get away from him if necessary, using her newfound powers. Although he could have lived without her admitting this morning that her ability to teleport was flaky, and she had only managed it once when she had run from him. Valen fussed over Eva in the corner, as if she was the one about to get snatched by their enemy, risking her life to get them intel. "I still say you should just let me step to the house where they held me." Marek scowled at Karis, unable to keep a lid on his temper, as 1,000 ways this could go wrong crowded his mind, tormenting him. "They will not be there anymore." Karis offered him a look that Marek supposed was meant to be consoling, as if he would believe Karis felt bad about what he was asking Katerina to do, or that she might end up dead. "I could take a look." Marek paused and looked down at Katerina as her hand came to lightly rest on his arm. Confidence shone in her eyes, mingled with determination that ignited the spark he had always found so alluring. "I can do this." She stroked her palm down his arm, sending a warm shiver skating over his skin. "I'll be fine." She wouldn't be. He knew that in his gut. He didn't believe in omens, but gods he was starting to. As much as he tried not to do it, he couldn't stop himself from thinking that skull he had watched sliding down his shower screen in Seville had been a portent, a sign that he was going to lose someone close to him, someone he loved with all of his heart. He stared down into her eyes, wishing that strength that blazed in them would ease his mind, but it wouldn't. He wouldn't be satisfied until she was back in his arms again, safe from his enemy. She smiled, one that hit him hard in his heart, and trailed her fingers off his hand as her gaze flicked to Karis. Whatever she saw there had her toying with the hem of her dirty cream camisole, smoothing it down over her jeans. Marek looked at his brother, and his mood took a sharp downwards turn, something he hadn't thought possible since he was already on the verge of unleashing an earthquake across the northern hemisphere. Karis's green eyes remained cold and hard as they slid from Katerina to Marek. Damn, his brother really resembled their father when he wore that look, the one that revealed how disgusted he was that Marek was allowing Katerina to touch him, that they were close to each other despite what she was becoming. Marek didn't care. He turned to Katerina, fighting for the words again, aware of Karis's gaze on him, and Valen's too now as the room fell quiet. He wanted to tell her now, before she threw herself into danger for him, that he had feelings for her that wouldn't change no matter what. In the end, he settled for pressing a soft kiss to her dirty forehead and whispering in Catalan, "Be careful. I will be there to keep an eye on you." She nodded against his lips, touched his hand, and then broke away from him. Watching her go to Karis twisted him in knots, filling him with an urge to steal his brother's part in this, so he could remain in contact with her and so his brother couldn't lay a hand on her. Karis took hold of her before he could make a move and disappeared. Marek stepped, following him and trying to tamp down the black urge to rip his brother to pieces. That urge only intensified as he landed in the elegant front garden of the Tokyo mansion and found Karis shoving Katerina towards the wooden porch, making far too big a show of it. Katerina struggled against his hold, and every instinct Marek possessed roared at him to fight his brother and stop him from harming her. He fought it as he stormed after them, with Valen hot on his heels, as Eva lingered in the garden, waiting to play her part. Karis disappeared into the mansion with Katerina, and someone snarled, "Escher." Marek had wanted him away from the mansion when this went down, but Karis had insisted he remain to make it look more realistic. Marek was beginning to think Karis just wanted to frighten Katerina, showing her what sort of reception some members of his family would always give her, until they managed to reverse what had been done to her. Marek didn't bother to take his boots off at the door. He strode into the old building, quickly scanned it, and banked left when he spotted Karis shoving Katerina towards the bathhouse, and the small building beyond it that housed Escher's cage. "What the fuck is happening?" Escher bit out, his voice a black snarl as he shirked Aiko's soft touch, and took swift strides across the tatami mats, closing the gap between him and Karis. And Katerina. Karis looked back at his brother, his grip on Katerina's arm tightening to the point where her skin blanched and she flinched. Marek bit back a growl, somehow managing to hold it at bay as he glared at Karis. The growl did leave his lips when Karis spoke. "We have captured a spy and need to question her. Are you up for it?" His cold green eyes remained fixed on Escher, even as Marek shook his head and stormed towards him. He changed course when Escher's blue eyes brightened dangerously and his brother smiled slowly. No way. They needed to make it look convincing in case the Wraith was watching just as expected, but he was damned if he was going to let Escher lay a finger on Katerina. Escher doubled his pace, practically running to keep up with Karis as he reached the space between the shower stalls and the hot spring bath that looked out onto the Zen garden. Marek raced to intervene. He hit the corridor that ran alongside the kitchen area just as Katerina turned and shoved Karis in the chest, catching him off guard and sending him falling into the bath. What the hell was she doing? She threw a panicked look at Escher. The fear Marek could sense in her spiked. Genuine. He knew what she could see as Escher rushed her, claws and fangs, black eyes flooded with a terrible hunger for violence, edged with crimson, because she had just dared to hurt Karis. Marek launched himself at Escher, no longer giving a damn whether the Wraith saw his desire to protect her, because this was no longer a game. It had become real the moment Katerina had attacked Karis. Escher would kill her for it. Before he could tackle his brother, Escher hit an invisible wall and fell on his backside. Blue hexagonal glyphs shimmered across the air between Katerina and Escher. She had developed more than one succubus talent. Katerina's hazel gaze landed on him, a myriad of feelings swimming in it, and then she disappeared. Outside, Eva yelled an obscenity and gravel crunched in a rapid beat, telling him that the assassin was giving chase, and their plan was somewhat back on track. He pivoted on his heel and shoved past Valen as his brother did the same, rushing for the door. Behind him, Karis bit out a curse and Escher growled. Marek hit the porch, spotted Katerina near the broad wooden gate in the white wall that surrounded the mansion. Eva lunged at Katerina. Katerina dodged the blow, grabbed Eva's arm, and teleported with her. Marek cursed this time. "That wasn't the fucking plan," Valen snarled beside him. "I know that." Marek turned on him, his temper spiking right back up, as he faced off against his brother, because Valen wasn't the only one frantic to find his woman. He stepped to beyond the wall into the street between the box-shaped houses that filled the quiet suburb of the city. He scanned the roads around him, fought to breathe slowly to bring his racing heart back under control as he struggled to hear over the thundering beat of it. "Damn it, Katerina!" He twisted this way and that, searching for her. To his left, Valen appeared at another crossroads, one that had a small group of trees near it. A square? His brother yelled, "Eva!" Pivoted and kicked off. Marek sprinted as hard as he could, and when that wasn't fast enough, he stepped again, draining more of his strength. He landed in a dead run beside Valen, his pulse pounding again as they streaked across the square. Valen must have seen something. It was all Marek could think as a desperate need to find Katerina flooded him. They hit another road, and then Valen broke right down a smaller one, and Marek heard it. A muffled grunt and a ripe curse. In Catalan. He doubled his effort, pushing himself towards his limit, outpacing Valen, but not for long. Valen caught up with him, and together they broke into another square, this one little more than a few trees in each corner of a dusty patch of land. In the middle of it, Katerina and Eva were fighting, their moves looking almost as if they had been perfectly choreographed and practiced 1,000 times. Katerina dodged and ducked, sweeping under Eva's arm as she attempted to land a blow, and swung her leg out toward Eva's ankles. Eva leaped over Katerina's foot, landed on one leg, and brought her other one around in a swift arc. Katerina raised both hands and managed to block it, grabbed Eva's ankle and twisted hard, sending the black-haired assassin into the dirt. Katerina shuffled backwards and onto her feet. Eva leaned back, pressed her hands into the dirt, and pushed off, springing onto hers and straight into an attack that Katerina must have seen coming. But she took the blow to her left cheek like a champion, staggered to her right, and whipped back to face Eva. Katerina wiped the back of her hand across her mouth and looked down at the near-black blood on it. On a vicious yell, she launched herself at the assassin. Marek wasn't sure he could watch as she failed to land half of her blows and left herself open to most of Eva's. It took all his will to keep his boots planted to the road and not intervene. As she fought Eva, a feeling built inside him, that sense of doom returning. "I can't let her do this," Marek murmured as she took a blow to her gut and doubled over. Not the fight, but what came after. She would be in too much danger. One false move on her part and he would lose her forever. When Eva delivered a hard right hook that landed Katerina on her backside, Marek lunged forward. Violet smoke spilled from the air behind her, swirling in the gentle breeze and turning black in places as it spread. Sparks of green and violet chased across it as it formed an oval at least 4 feet wide and 7 feet tall. A bare leg appeared out of it, long and shapely, and Marek readied himself as the illusionist stepped from the portal. The high slit in her slinky black strapless dress caused the material to fall away from her left leg as she moved towards Katerina and Eva, her silver eyes swirling as she assessed both women. She casually flicked her long fall of dark violet hair over her right shoulder. Her black lips curled into a wretched smile. Eva grunted, dug her fingers into her black jaw-length hair, clawing it back to flash the electric blue streaks in it, and went down. Hard. "Eva!" Valen threw his right hand forwards, unleashing a white-blue bolt of lightning that shot towards the demon as he raced towards Eva. The illusionist stepped back into the portal. It rapidly dissipated, and Valen's attack went straight through it and out the other side. It struck a tree in the corner of the square, and wooden splinters exploded from it, flames swift to engulf it as the lightning ravaged it. Katerina flinched away, curling forwards with her hands over her head as she gave her back to the blast. Marek was swift to raise his hand, to pull up a wall of earth between her and the shards of wood. The portal reappeared on the other side of Katerina, and the illusionist stepped out again, her smile cold as she looked at Valen where he knelt on the ground, holding Eva as she rocked and muttered things under her breath. When the demon turned that cold smile on Katerina, Marek knew in his gut that their plan had failed. Katerina seemed to know it too. She flung herself at the demon. "Take me with you. I need to see my brother. I have information to give you." The demon curled a lip at her and brushed Katerina's hands away as she looked down her nose at her. "Whatever information you have, it is of little consequence now." The demon waved Katerina away. When that didn't deter Katerina and she seized her arm, the demon scowled at her, grabbed her wrist and twisted her arm, forcing her to release her and sending her to her knees on a pained cry. The illusionist narrowed her silver eyes on Katerina. "Your role in this play is over. Eli no longer has a use for you. You have played your part." "My brother!" Katerina tried to grab her again, desperation washing across her face as she reached for the demon's leg. "Eli still has use for him." The illusionist lifted her left foot, pressed her heeled shoe to Katerina's chest, and shoved her backwards as she sneered. Katerina's back hit the dirt, but she was swift to recover, scrambling onto her knees and kicking off as the demon backed towards the portal. Marek kicked off too, sprinting across the dirt on an intercept course. If they couldn't get Katerina to infiltrate the enemy to bring them information, then he would get it out of this demon. He lunged for the illusionist as she stepped into the shimmering oval, and collided with Katerina. "He will be safe with us." Those words drifted from the violet and black smoke as it began to thin and dissipate, and Marek couldn't hold back the growl that rumbled up his throat. Karis was not going to be happy. He should have reacted faster, the moment the demon had made it clear that they were done with Katerina. But part of him had believed she could convince the demon to take her to the Wraith. Katerina stumbled through the lingering tendrils of the portal, pivoted and tried again, disturbing the remnants until they were no more. "I have to reach my brother. I have to reach him. Let me through." Marek's heart went out to her as she desperately tried to capture tiny wisps of the portal. To his right, Valen helped Eva onto her feet, every other word that left his lips a curse. A light entered Katerina's eyes. Don't you do it. Marek seized her before she could follow through with that thought. We'll find another way. She tried to wrestle free of him, but he tightened his grip on her, refusing to let her go, using all of his will and every drop of his power to keep her in place and make her listen to him. Your teleporting skills might land you way off the mark. It might land you somewhere that could kill you. He lowered his head and willed her to look at him, but she was too busy trying to escape his hold. Don't, Katerina. I'll take you wherever you need to go. We'll get Guillaume back together. He had no love for vampires, but Katerina loved this one deeply, so he would do all in his power to save him. I have to help him, Marek. Her struggle suddenly ceased, and he could see it in her eyes as her strength leached from her. I need to see him. I need him. She sagged against him, and he released her and gently wrapped his arms around her. We'll find him. He bent his head and kissed her hair as he stroked her back. He looked at his brother. How's Eva? Valen stopped fussing over her for barely a second. Recovering. What did the bitch mean? Katerina has played her role. He wasn't sure. Katerina was meant as bait for me. Maybe she served her purpose when I was captured, but I escaped. He frowned as he looked at that from all the angles, considering every possibility. The demons didn't really get what they wanted from me. As those words left his lips, a sense of dread loomed inside him. Gods. A shiver shot down his spine. An ache bloomed in his shoulder. What is it? Valen twisted to face him, his pale eyebrows knitting hard above his bright golden eyes. The wraith knocked me out by stabbing me with a blade. He stared straight through his brother, reeling as the implications of that hit him, and they hit him hard. Yeah, you said that before. What about it? He didn't have time to explain. Grab everyone and meet me at the villa. I have to go back to Seville. He pulled Katerina against him and focused. Why? Valen hollered, halting him in his tracks. If his brother needed a reason, something to motivate him into moving his arse and doing what Marek wanted, he would give him one. The wraith has my memories. He knows the protective wards on my villa, Marek barked, and understanding dawned in Valen's eyes. Capturing him hadn't been the objective. Stealing his memories had been. The wraith had been after his amulet the whole time. He's going to try to open the gate. Chapter 29. Marek landed in his villa with Katerina to find the entire place had been turned upside down. He released her and stepped down from the overturned couch he had landed on and ran his hands over his hair as he looked around at the mess. He took swift steps across the terracotta tiles, heading straight for his office and the cupboard there, some stupid part of him hoping that it was going to be all right. The doors were open. He eased towards the cupboard and stared at the circular shield hanging at the back of it, and the place where his amulet should have been. Damn it! He grabbed the fallen lamp from his desk and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall near the window opposite the door and smashed into pieces. Katerina gasped behind him. Marek shoved his fingers through his hair and growled in frustration as he clawed it back. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still time. He looked out of the window at the darkness. Maybe he was fucked. Instinct said to move now, but he was already in enough trouble. If he went to the gates alone, Karis would kill him. The wraith wouldn't be there alone, and Marek wasn't talking about just the illusionist being with him. The demon was clever. There was no way he hadn't mustered an army of demons to keep Marek and his brothers occupied while he interfered with the gate, using them as cannon fodder to ensure he and the illusionist were able to complete their mission without coming under attack. I'm sorry, Katerina said and slowly approached him. She slid her hand over his back as he leaned forwards and braced his palms against the edge of the desk, anger and disappointment colliding inside him. Whatever it is he took, we can get it back. It's not your fault, he muttered. This mess is on me. All of this mess is on me. What happened to you, what happened tonight, it's all on me. I should have considered the implications of what the bastard did to me, but I was too focused on my hurt, my anger. He pushed up and huffed as he looked at the cupboard, as he focused on the villa and felt that every ward had been disabled. I knew the wraith must have taken my memories through the blade, as he did with Escher. He turned and sank onto his arse on the desk. I'm an idiot for not realizing it earlier. Nah, don't be too hard on yourself. If you're an idiot, what does that make most of us? Valen appeared in the middle of the room with Eva tucked close to him, both of them armed for war. The onyx leather holster over Valen's black t-shirt held rows of small throwing knives against his ribs, and a short blade hung from the waist of his combat trousers. The holster over Eva's own black t-shirt held guns, a weapon Marek had learned she preferred over knives, although she did have one of those strapped to the waist of her tight black jeans. We all fuck up at some point. Valen boxed him on the arm. That wasn't a comfort. So far, none of them had messed up this badly. The enemy had managed to seize an amulet more than once before, but the brothers involved had felt the wards on their homes trigger and had returned quickly enough to stop the enemy from realizing the amulets weren't the keys of Hades. Marek had a sinking feeling that wouldn't be the case this time. He wasn't sure how long the Wraith had been in possession of his amulet, but he was assuming it had been with him from the moment Marek had come around in that country house to find himself a prisoner of his enemy, which meant there was a chance the Wraith had already made an attempt on the gate and knew the amulets didn't control them. And if the Wraith knew that, how long would it be before the male realized he and his brothers were the keys to the gates, and their blood could open it for him? Diamond and Callistos arrived, both of them geared up for a battle. Diamond wore a similar holster to Valen over his long-sleeved navy roll neck he had paired with his jeans. Callistos had a wicked pair of knives the length of his forearm strapped to his hips, and was wearing black leather van braces over his forearms. Karis appeared barely a second later. Not a single weapon on him. Escher and Ares have agreed to protect the other gates. Karis adjusted the sleeves of his crisp black shirt and scowled at the open cupboard, at the leather and bronze shield hung on the back wall of it. Any idea how long it has been missing? Marek shook his head. The wards were disabled. Some of them were complicated and might have taken time to break. But it's highly probable that the Wraith has been in possession of my amulet since the night I went missing. Valen whistled low. Diamond cursed. You think they know? Callistos looked from Marek to Karis, his stormy blue eyes growing darker as the tips of his blonde ponytail fluttered. How about we find out? Valen touched Cal's shoulder, pulled Eva against him, and smiled. Race you to the twin gate? Cal nodded and stepped. I'll check the main gate. I'll text if something is wrong. Diamond disappeared before Marek could tell him to be careful. Sorry, Marek muttered as he looked at Karis. Karis shrugged it off. Sooner or later, the ruse would end. We are more than prepared for that. We are strong enough to face whatever they dare to throw at us. Marek wasn't sure they were, but he nodded and waited for Karis to step before he slid his arm around Katerina's waist. I thought you wouldn't want me there. Her hazel eyes searched his, and he cursed the doubts in them. I want you right where I can see you. He stroked the fingers of his free hand down her cheek. I need to know you're safe. He stepped before she could answer him, landing at the main gate. Diamond stood in the middle of the beautiful garden in the heart of Seville, staring at the low fountain that stood in the middle of a crossroads in the gravel path that intersected the shrubs and trees. He looked up from his phone, the screen making his irises appear as white as snow ringed with black. Nothing here. Marek tightened his grip on Katerina and teleported again, landing on the hill overlooking the dusty valley basin, and around 4 dozen demons. He immediately crouched behind a bush and pulled Katerina down with him. Maybe they weren't too late after all. The Wraith hadn't attempted to open the gate yet. They could turn this around and keep the enemy under the illusion that the amulets controlled the gate, keeping their focus on getting hold of them, and off his brother's weaknesses. His gaze slid to Katerina, his own weakness. Just as Megan was Ares' weakness and Eva was Valen's. And, well, everyone was Escher's weakness, but if Aiko was hurt again, the world would pay for it. Which meant Marek needed to get his hands on that amulet before the Wraith realized all it did was protect him from the gatekeeper on the other side. Valen lay prone on the ground beside him, frowning at the gathered demons. Someone arrange a party? He hissed with a smile in his voice that was out of place in such a grave situation. It earned him a sigh from Karis. You take the left and I'll take the right? Cal whispered, and Marek wanted to cuff him for taking this so lightly. Marek wished Karis hadn't brought him. Whatever went down tonight, Callistos was going to take it personally. The Seville gates had been built when Callistos and Calindria had been born, meaning Callistos and Calindria were the keys to them, bound by blood to the gates in secret during their construction. Callistos had ultimate power over the gate bound to him, and there was a chance he could control the gate that had been bound to their sister, too. Marek kept a close eye on him, watching that storm brewing in his eyes. He hated to admit it, but Karis had been right to bring him. If the gate needed to be closed, Callistos might be able to do it. Emphasis on the might. It was just as likely that Callistos would push himself too hard attempting it and would black out. Marek surveyed the demons as they moved, parting to allow two figures through the crowd, the Wraith and the Illusionist. The demons spread, moving as one to form a ring around the area where the gate would form, all of them facing outwards and all of them armed with swords. Marek's eyebrows drew down as he charted the location of the gate in relation to the wall of demons, and calculated the space the disk of the gate would occupy once it opened. The demons had been placed in a perfect ring around the gate, leaving only a few feet of bare land between their backs and the edge of the disk. He narrowed his gaze on the Wraith where he stood, near one side of the ring, his long black coat making him almost blend with the Illusionist as she came to stand beside him. The bastard must have noted the width and position of the edges in relation to the terrain when Marek had been called here before. This had been his plan all along. The Wraith lifted his right arm, and the amulet dangling from it caught the slender moonlight. Any moment now, the Wraith was going to realize that the amulet didn't control the gate. Marek needed to get down there, and fast. He went to move. Froze. Marek's eyes slowly widened as the amulet began to shine. "What the fuck?" Valen muttered, echoing Marek's thoughts perfectly. Marek gritted his teeth as something tugged at his chest. The gate. Someone was on the other side. That was why the amulet was reacting. He could use it to his advantage. He kicked off and skidded down the dusty hill, using his arms to keep his balance as he plunged towards the demons waiting at the bottom of it. One hissed as it noticed him, drawing the attention of the Illusionist. And then the Wraith. Marek barreled towards the wall of demons. Karis beat him to it. His brother appeared before him, a shadow in the night, black tendrils of smoke rising from his short onyx hair like a twisted crown, as he launched a hand out at the first demon, closed it around his throat, and snapped his neck in one brutal move. Two demons next to the fallen male shook themselves out of their stupor and attacked as one. Shadows raced from the trees, leaving the ground beneath them eerily void of them, and shot upwards as they reached the first demon. The male panicked, slapping at the black spreading up his legs, clawing himself in the process as he tried to get the shadows off him. He spun away from the group, shrieking as he twisted in circles, desperately attempting to stop the shadows. That high keening noise shut off as the shadows engulfed him. Just as quickly as they had swallowed him, they fell away. The demon dropped to the ground, his skin a sickly shade of gray and eyes white as he stared into nothing. Marek shuddered. Once upon a time, he had been envious of Karis's power. Then he had seen it in action, sucking the life from things. A black, malevolent force that seemed to have a mind of its own. The shadows rushed past him, and he stepped back, giving them a wide berth as they skittered towards the wall of demons. Katerina slammed into his back, breathing hard. "That was—" Her words died as she looked beyond him. Marek tracked the line of her gaze. Karis cut through the demons, slashing throats with his claws and snapping necks, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake, all with an empty look in his eyes and no trace of emotion on his face. His brother was a cold, merciless killer, as he decimated demon after demon, never slowing, not even when the more foolish ones tried to attack him rather than flee. Marek made a mental note to keep Katerina far away from his brother. To his left, Valen and Eva were working in tandem to breach the wall of demons. Beyond them, Callistos and Daimon were cutting a path, combining their powers to form short spears of ice and propel them at high speeds at their enemies. Marek cursed as light flickered in the center of the collapsing ring of demons, a bright purple spark that illuminated the entire area in blinding flashes. It grew rapidly, forming an orb that twisted, filling the air with a low hum as the sense of power built inside Marek. The gate. The orb flattened into a disc that grew as it rotated, and then another ring formed in a flash of yellow light, slowly turning in the opposite direction to the first one. A blue wave rippled from that ring as symbols appeared around it, and another one formed, this one rotating in the same direction as the center, but slower. The wraith looked from the growing gate to Karis and the others, and then finally Marek. A slow smile curled his lips, sent a chill down Marek's spine. The bastard knew the amulet wasn't the key. It was right there in his violet eyes, in that satisfied glow they held. Marek's first intuition had been right, and they were too late. This wasn't the first attempt to open the gate. This was a trap. The wraith had been waiting here, aware that Marek would realize what had happened at some point and would come to this place to try and stop him. And in doing so, Marek had exposed the gate to danger. The wraith twisted the amulet into his fists and crushed it. The gate remained. One of his brothers cursed, probably Valen. He looked towards him and cursed too, as a violet and black portal formed in the midst of the demons, and then another one followed it, and another, until there were 6 of them. As soon as they were large enough, demons poured from them. There was no way his brothers and Eva could handle so many. Marek looked between them and the wraith where he approached the gate. He needed to help his brothers, but he needed to protect the gate too. Maybe he could do both. He focused on the gate as he summoned his powers, and the ground shook beneath his boots. Katerina grabbed one of the fallen swords from the dirt and battled the demons as they turned their sights on him, clearly sensing the rising threat coming from him. He fought to keep his focus on the gate, on stopping it from opening completely. He dug deep into the ground, past the earth to the rock below, and pictured a ring around the gate. Towering slabs of hard earth and huge monoliths of rock burst from the ground in a wave, running anti-clockwise from beyond the wraith and the gate, towards Valen and everyone to his left, and past him. A vicious snarl left Karis's lips as he twisted and slammed his fist against one of the walls that sprung up right beside him, shattering it with a single blow despite the strength of it. His brother was formidable. Marek had never seen anyone break one of his walls before, not with such ease at least. Marek stepped to the other side of the wall of earth and rock and looked to his right, commanding it to continue to form. Several dozen demons poured into the inner ring before he could close it. They ran through the gate, and the ring sparked and blackened, the power it emitted pulsing in a strong wave through Marek. One of the demons lingered too long and went down screaming as the gate reacted more severely, a wave of colorful light bursting across it as it tried to purge the taint and reset itself. The wraith eased a step back from it and guided the illusionist behind him. Karis appeared within the wall and cut through the demons, taking 2 down with a single blow, before he turned his sights on a third and then a fourth. He wasn't alone. Katerina suddenly appeared to Marek's left, looked around herself, and then sprang into action, her blade a silver blur as she attacked the demons, driving them back and buying Marek time. He wouldn't waste it. Marek focused on the gate rather than the demons, trusting Katerina to deal with them and keep them from him. The rings began to slow, and the disc began to shrink. The wraith unleashed an unholy snarl. "Marek?" A soft female voice invaded his mind. Marek ignored it. It wasn't real. She wasn't real. He refused to look at Erlia, but he was aware of her beside him, moving towards him. He kept his gaze on the gate, his focus on his duty as the wraith raised his hands. 5 points of light appeared around the outer ring of the gate, swirling violet orbs streaked with green, and they grew as the wraith murmured low words. Power charged the air around Marek, and he fought the gate as it slowed to a halt and then began to open again. "Shit," he muttered and redoubled his effort, attempting to push back against whatever power was in the incantation the wraith was chanting. He risked a glance away from the gate, trying to find his brother. "Karis!" Karis appeared beside him, took one look at the gate as the 5 points of light moved outwards and the discs grew larger, another ring appearing. Not Marek's doing. Karis raised his hand and shadows shrouded the gate. The power humming in the air weakened, and Marek focused everything he had on the gate, on convincing the damn thing that it wanted to close. Purple beams shot up from amidst the shadows, curved towards each other, and twisted around to form a dome above the gate. The shadows separated. Karis grunted and stretched his hand out to them, his arm shaking as he splayed his fingers, and the shadows writhed, attempting to obey him. Holes began to appear in them, patches where the colors of the gate shone through, chasing back the darkness. And then they began to close. Karis was winning. His brother stiffened, stared wide-eyed directly ahead of him, and his shoulders slackened as his arm fell to his side. The shadows evaporated, revealing the gate, and the power contained in the violet orbs and the words the wraith was chanting rose again, pushing down on Marek as he fought the gate, trying to force it closed before it opened enough that someone could pass through it safely. "Karis!" he snapped, but his brother didn't move, just kept staring at something that wasn't there. "Diamond!" Marek hollered. "Take her down!" Before that pain that was steadily building in Karis's green eyes reached a crescendo and he unleashed it all on the world. Whatever the illusionist was showing his brother, it was tearing him apart. Diamond appeared beside him, took one look at Karis, and said, "Has to be Enyo." Cal came thundering out of the black vapor trail of his teleport and grabbed Karis, pulling him around to face him. Karis snarled and tried to look back at the empty space where whatever he was seeing was playing out for him. "Get him out of here," Marek bit out. Cal's eyes widened. "I'm not that strong. He isn't going to budge." "Damn it. Do something," Marek snapped at Diamond. His brother grabbed Callistos and pulled him away from Karis, towards the illusionist where she stood behind the wraith, her silver eyes glassy, was attempting to control more than one illusion taking its toll on her. He looked around and found no sign of Airlia. The demon was putting all of her effort into destroying Karis. Karis slowly reached for the ring around his thumb. Marek frowned as he didn't spin it. He started to pull it off. "Don't do it!" Marek grabbed his arm and shook him. "Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. It's a lie, Karis." His brother slowly turned empty green eyes on him. "Shut her down!" Marek hollered to Diamond and Callistos and slapped Karis. "Snap out of it!" Karis's eyes went pitch black. He lashed out at Marek with his claws. This wasn't good. Either striking his brother had really pissed him off, or the illusionist was attempting to pull him into whatever Karis was seeing, turning him against Marek. He raised his arm to block Karis's next blow, and the sense of power in the air grew stronger as his focus shifted away from the gate. Panic lanced him. If he didn't do something, it was going to open, and he had the dreadful feeling that it would stay open. He needed to break those points of light, somehow. He just wasn't sure how. Karis lashed out at him again, and Marek had to step to avoid his shadows as they attacked, shooting towards his legs. He reappeared in a clearing on the other side of the gate. His brother's gaze whipped to him. A vicious snarl peeled from his lips as he bared his fangs. Karis swept his arm up, and Marek realized his mistake too late to stop it. A wave of shadows erupted from the ground, cutting in a line straight towards him, right through the heart of the gate. His lungs seized as he threw himself to his left as he hit the dirt and barely avoided being struck by the shadows. His eyes leaped to the gate and widened. Several of the glyphs in the rings sparked and stuttered, little more than shattered pieces now. The rings halted. Not good. Marek looked through the gate to his brothers. Diamond and Cal both stopped fighting the demons and looked at the gate, and then at Karis, their wide eyes reflecting the colorful light it emanated as it slowly began to glow brighter. Cal's blue eyes met Marek's, and resolve filled them. He wanted to tell his brother not to do it, but they had no other option. They needed to close the gate before the demons could destroy it now it was seized open, and the only way to do that was to seal it, shutting it down completely and removing all power from it. A process that might kill Callistos. His brother didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the gate, ripping his vambraces from his forearms as he ran at it, his blonde hair streaming behind him. The wraith signaled the illusionist, and she turned her sights on Cal. Marek's stomach fell. They were going to use illusions against Callistos to buy themselves time to destroy the gate. Valen appeared with Eva, and Diamond joined him as he launched himself at the demons swarming around the illusionist and the wraith. A living shield that his brothers would be able to tear through if they had enough time. But time was against them. His gaze flickered past the demons to Karis as his brother staggered backwards and looked around himself, shock rippling across his face as his green eyes landed on the gate. The illusionist had released him. To focus all of her power on Cal? Marek met Karis's gaze across the shimmering gate. "We need those two away from here right now, or it's over." Karis's gaze zipped to Cal and then the wraith and illusionist. Marek kicked off, intending to join him when he teleported to reach them. Only it wasn't his brother who appeared behind the two demons. Katerina was suddenly there. She grabbed both of them, and his heart lunged into his throat and slammed to a halt. No, not her. It was suicide. The demons would kill her for interfering with their plans when they had been on the cusp of a victory. "Katerina!" She looked across at him, gave him a sorrowful smile that told him she was well aware of what was going to happen to her, and disappeared. Chapter 30. Callistos had never heard anything as terrifying as the mournful, vicious sound that ripped from Marek as he sprinted through the flat, glowing disk of the gate and skidded to a halt where Katerina had been, and was now gone. The ground shook and bucked beneath Cal's boots, sending Eva to her knees and Valen cursing as he went down with her when he attempted to help her. Marek tore through the demons they had been fighting with Diamond, the scent of spilled black blood flooding the air as it ran in a river across the dry ground, soaking into the cracks that formed as the tremors continued. The olive trees around the grove swayed, and rocks tumbled down the hillsides. Cal kicked off as his senses blared a warning, narrowly avoiding being hit by one of the boulders. A demon beyond him wasn't so lucky. The rock crushed him beneath its weight and knocked several more flying before it hit the hill on the other side and rolled back, slowing to a halt before it could cause any more mayhem. "Anyone care to get him under control?" Cal kept his focus on the gate as he held his palms out facing it, focusing on it to assess the damage. The moment Karis's shadows had torn through it, pain had ripped through Callistos, stealing his breath and leaving him feeling as if he was the one that had been damaged by his brother's attack. He wasn't sure he had the strength to do what was necessary, not after the fight against the demons, but he was going to give it everything he had, if he could concentrate. He leaped aside again as a huge fissure formed in the ground, the side he landed on in a low crouch, dropping as the other one rose to tower over him. "Fucking hell," Valen growled. "Dial it back." His brother appeared on the other side of Cal with Eva tucked against him, his glare leveled on Marek as he ripped apart a demon and tossed the body into the crevasse. "Marek!" Karis snapped, his deep voice a commanding snarl that had Marek finally stopping his assault. Cal glanced at his blood-soaked brother. Or maybe he had stopped because all the demons were dead now. Marek leaned over, braced his hands against his knees, and breathed hard, his back straining as he fought for air, his eyes as black as night. "Can you think of anywhere she might have taken them? Or they would have taken her?" Karis moved to stand beside Cal, his voice level and calm. It had the desired effect on Marek, pulling him back from the darkness. Marek grumbled, "I can think of a few places. Take Diamond. I don't want you going alone." Karis didn't take his eyes off the gate as Marek grabbed Diamond and stepped. God's damn it. The fact his brother had cursed made the gravity of the situation hit home. If Cal couldn't seal the gate, there was a danger the mortal world and the underworld would bleed together through it, and that would be the beginning of the end. After Karis had revealed they were the keys of Hades, bound to the gates through blood, they'd had several meetings to discuss what that might mean, and what they might have to do to seal a gate if it came down to that. In the end, the only solid guess they agreed on was spilling their blood on the gate. Blood bound them to the gate, so maybe blood could control it. None of them knew what to expect if they managed to forge a connection with a gate, though, or how they were supposed to close it. Something told him it was going to be painful and it wasn't going to be easy. He let his gaze lose focus as he looked at the gate, summoning that feeling that brewed inside him whenever he was seeing the other world. The sky turned blood red, streaked with flaming boulders that rained down on the land, tearing up huge tracts of the black earth as they impacted. Trees blazed around him, smoke filled the air, together with the distant sound of screams, some human, some other things. The acrid stench of burning flesh filled his nostrils, and ahead of him an enormous red tower speared the sky, flanked by smaller black ones. At their wide, jagged bases, shadows swirled, a legion of demons illuminated by pyres on which mortals burned. Cal squeezed his eyes shut, not needing to see any more. His glimpse of the other world, the future of this one should the enemy succeed, did its job. Strength surged through him, determination to do his duty and not fail in his mission driving it higher, as he opened his eyes and focused on the shattered, colorful horizontal disk of the gate that hovered a few feet above the earth before him. He could do this. He pulled one of the knives from the sheath on his hip, took a deep breath, and drew the blade across his left palm. He curled his fingers over into a fist as he sheathed the blade, ignoring the sting of the cut as he squeezed it, because he was sure he was about to experience far worse pain, and strode towards the gate. When he reached it, he turned his hand on its side and sucked down another breath as he waited. A bead of blood pooled on the side of his hand, and he swallowed and braced himself as it trembled and fell. It hit the gate. Cal held his breath. Either this would work or it wouldn't, and they would be in even deeper shit, trying to come up with something on the fly. Colors shimmered across the disc, chased by a wave of red that rapidly spread to cover every ring and glyph of the gate. Was it working? Pain cut through him, a white-hot bolt of lightning that tore a grunt from his lips as he gritted his teeth and bore it. He knew the great rip through the middle of the gate hurt. He could feel everything about the gate as a strange connection formed between them. It danced across his skin at first, a wave of prickles that made him aware of the power of the gate, how that line of shattered glyphs was painful, and left him feeling as if it was a living thing. Maybe it was. They were forged from blood, after all. Cal wasn't sure it would be a good thing if the gate was more than just a portal, if the blood had given it a strange sort of life. He had always wondered if they were sentient, from the day he had seen one react to a demon, shimmering black where the demon had passed through it and sparking violently, as if it despised the creatures as much as he and his brothers did. If the gate was sentient in a way, it might not like what he intended to do to it. He got his answer when he focused on the thought of closing it, on the fresh blood he had spilled on it that now coated the surface, dimming the light of it further with each drop he fed to it. The prickling became 1,000 white-hot needles that sank deep into his bones. The pain that washed through him was so intense, he bent forwards and vomited. "Cal?" Valen lunged towards him. Cal managed to hold his free hand out and shake his head, because he had the sudden urge to lash out at his brother to keep him away, to protect himself. "I don't think—" He swallowed and breathed through another wave of nausea. "It likes it." Valen slowly looked from him to the gate. The colors tried to break through, writhing beneath the crimson, turning black in places. "It's fighting you." Karras looked as if he wanted to reach for him too, but held himself back as he looked between Cal and the gate. Something slowly filled his brother's eyes. "Doing this," Cal muttered, and straightened as he finally tamped down the pain, bringing it to a more manageable level, one where he could move without wanting to vomit. "Don't try to stop me." Karras's jaw flexed, and he pivoted away from Cal on a low curse. The second of the night. Cal wiped his clean hand across his mouth and then motioned for his brothers to back off, because the connection between him and the gate calmed as Karras distanced himself. Either it hated his brothers near it now it was damaged, or it really didn't like Karras anymore. It was probably the latter since Karras had attacked it, but there was no harm in gaining himself some space in which to work. His brothers backed off, and he focused back on the gate. Pain rippled through him, a streak right up his front and back. He focused on that line as he squeezed his hand, dripping more blood onto the gate, building the connection between them. The blood gathered along the line of the fracture and then parted as he stared at it, wanting to see beyond the crimson to the glyphs and rings. Sparks of color emanated from the shattered glyphs. Could he repair them and restore the gate? That weird connection between him and it coaxed him into doing it, because the gate wanted to be fixed. He looked at Karras where he had stopped near Valen and Eva. The look in his brother's eyes was right. The gate had to be sealed. Pain shot up his chest in a fierce wave, and he gritted his teeth against it as the connection wavered and the colors sparked brighter, turning black as they arced down to land on the crimson. He clenched his jaw and focused through the pain, but his connection began to slip, his control fading with it. He looked down at his hand. The offering of blood he was making wasn't enough, not if he wanted complete control over the gate, not if he wanted to seal it. He had to give it more. He drew the knife from the sheath, looked at his wrist. "Don't!" Karras barked. Cal drew it across his left wrist. His head turned as blood spilled in a waterfall onto the gate, and he blinked hard, fighting to keep his focus as he watched it hit the disc and spread across it in a thick layer, one that muted all the colors. The connection ran deeper, another 1,000 hot needles piercing his bones, and he swallowed down the bile that rose up his throat. The world blurred, but he kept it together, kept his eyes on the gate and his mind on not only closing it, but sealing it shut. Marek's voice swam in his ears, something about not being able to find Katerina, and then something that sounded a lot like a demand to know what the hell Cal was doing. Cal leaned forwards as heaviness invaded his body, blinked again, and tried to focus on the gate. The connection between him and it seemed to disappear, blurring like the world around him, and he couldn't distinguish himself from the gate. It was as if they were one. A familiar feeling built inside him, a sense that he wasn't alone. That part of him that had been missing, the other half of his soul, was right there before him. Tears filled his eyes as he reached for it. For her. Her sweet laughter chased around his mind, her teasing words, her scolding ones. He sank into it all, let it wash over him as he reached harder, stretching further, sure that if he could just make it another inch, that he could touch her again. An image of a young girl holding his hand and pulling him through a field of daisies and poppies sprang into his mind, her blue eyes filled with laughter as she looked back at him, golden hair bouncing with each stride as she told him it was fine, and they wouldn't get into trouble for playing in the Elysian fields. Calindria. She stopped and turned, beamed at him, and his heart ached. Gods, I miss you. He shook his head when her hand slipped from his, as she backed away from him. He reached for her, silently begging her to come back. Don't leave me. She turned away and disappeared. The lush green world around him withered and blackened, the blue sky darkening to dull red, and the river that snaked through the land turning to blood, because there was no light in this world without her in it. Cal! Marek's voice was distant and watery in his ears. He shook his head. He didn't want to go. He could find her. Wherever she had gone, he would find her. Or he would follow her. What's wrong with him? Diamond this time. Calindria's blood was used to create the gate. Karis's voice was louder. Had he moved closer? A firm hand landed on his left shoulder, and another gripped his right, and something solid pressed against his back, just as his knees buckled. I have you, Karis whispered close to his ear. Focus on the gate, on what you want it to do. Focus on the present. We will find Calindria, I promise you. Cal sucked down a deep breath that burned his lungs, as if he had forgotten to breathe, and had been on the verge of suffocating. Maybe he had. Maybe that was why he always blacked out whenever he remembered something about his sister. Because he wanted to follow her, and the only way to do that was through dying. Karis eased him back onto his feet. She would want you to live. You know that. Cal did. Calindria would scold him if she knew he was even thinking about following her. She would be hurt by it. She would blame herself for his demise, and it would destroy her. He didn't want her to be sad. He wanted her to be happy. He wanted her to run in those fields again, to laugh and smile as she had then. But it's her, he croaked as he looked at the gate. I can feel her there. It's her blood, Cal, Marek said, closer to him too now. It's not her. We will find out what happened to her, and we will make sure she can rest at last. Cal focused and realized that Marek and Karis weren't the only ones around him. Valen and Eva were there too, and Diamond. Everyone was there at his back, at his side, lending him their strength. He pulled down another breath, told himself that Marek was right and it was her blood he could feel in the gate. It wasn't her. She was out there somewhere and they would get her to the Elysian fields. But that wouldn't happen unless he sealed this gate. He pushed deeper into the connection between him and the gate and focused on sealing it. If he had to seal something, how would he do it? Probably with wards. What were wards? Symbols that held power, like the glyphs on the gate. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly, and pictured the glyphs that filled each ring of the disc, and how he might change them in order to shut it down. As the first glyph altered, he sensed a difference, and the pain lessened. Encouraged by what had happened, he moved on to the next glyph and then the next one. He lost track of the world again as he altered one after the other, and lost track of himself in the process. It was only when his head turned and darkness encroached at the edges of his mind that he realized he was running out of time, losing too much blood. He moved faster, pushing himself to keep going, even as the darkness spread and began to crowd his mind. He had to keep going. He changed another glyph and felt the gate weakening, the connection fading with it. One last push. Cal pictured the remaining symbols, the 5 that filled the central disk of the gate. Someone propped him up, slipping an arm around his waist. Someone else gripped his arm for him, keeping it above the gate. He silently thanked his brothers as the first glyph changed to a ward, one designed to keep things hidden. It was the closest to sealing as he could get, and it was powerful, bound to the one who created it. It would prevent the gate from appearing to anyone, and no one but him would be able to undo it. He changed the second and third glyphs to the same ward, started to change the fourth, and then stopped as an idea hit him. 3 wards would be enough to hide the gate. The remaining 2 could be changed to something stronger, something liable to drain the last of his strength from him. But he would do it. He focused on both remaining glyphs at once, because the darkness was spreading faster now, and he wasn't an idiot. He had one shot at this, and he couldn't risk leaving even one glyph unchanged. Cal pictured the ward, imagined drawing it in his blood on the gate, overwriting the glyphs with it. One line formed and then another, and a dash and a circle. He slowly built the symbol, imbuing it with the last of his strength, with every shred of his power. "Whatever he's doing, it's working," Diamond muttered. Cal pushed through the pain and the darkness, holding on to consciousness and refusing to lose his grip on it. Just a few more lines and he would be done, the wards completed. The last curved spikes and slashes were the hardest, slow to form as they drained the last of his power. When they were done, he waited, barely breathing, and willed the wards to take effect. If he had done it right, they would be enough to bind the power the gate contained, and in conjunction with the ones designed to hide it, the gate would be rendered inactive, sealed permanently. The twin wards shone, golden light chasing over their surfaces, and he felt it when the gate disappeared, the connection between them severing, leaving him missing part of himself again. Relief washed through him, stripping him of his remaining strength, and he sagged in Karis's arms as his legs gave out. "It's done?" Marek sounded as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Rome Gate feels different," Valen muttered, a thoughtful edge to his voice. "Hong Kong, too." Diamond sounded distant. "You will have to tell us what you did later." Karis gently lifted him into his arms, and Cal didn't have the strength to make his brother put him down and stop coddling him. Just this once, he wouldn't fight his big brother. He was too damn tired. He sank against Karis's chest and mumbled, "After I've slept for forever." Coolness embraced him as they stepped, a brief connection to the underworld that soothed him and eased some of the pain burning in his heart, and then more voices rose around him. "What happened?" Escher's shocked voice became a snarl, and Cal knew he had seen the state of him. "Who did this?" Cal peeled his eyes open as someone touched his wrist. Aiko was there beside him, her dark eyes filled with concern as she assessed his injuries, and then she was springing into action, her black hair bobbing in its pigtails as she raced from the room. She returned with a medical kit and set it on the low dining table that occupied one side of the room. Karis turned away from her, carrying Cal like a damned princess in front of all of his brothers, and set him down on the couch that faced the TV. Aiko hurried over to him, sank to her knees beside him, and applied a white square piece of padding to his wrist before she carefully wrapped a bandage around it. She did the same with his hand, and he didn't have the strength to tell her that wound was fine and already healing. "I asked who did this," Escher snarled. "I did it." Cal pushed the words out, not about to let his brother go over the edge and flip his switch because he thought someone had slashed his wrist for him. "I needed blood to seal the gate." Escher's dark blue eyes landed on him. "You sealed a gate?" "The twin one." Marek gently placed his hand on Escher's shoulder over his dull gray shirt. Escher's black eyebrows dipped low. "I felt a shift. I thought I was just being weird." "We all felt it. Sealing one gate appears to have distributed the power it once contained to the remaining ones." Karis came to stand over Cal, his green eyes holding concern as he looked down at him. "Will you be all right?" Cal tried to give him a thumbs up, but he didn't have the strength. "Quit coddling," he murmured and sighed as he closed his eyes. "Just gonna nap." Sleep rose up on him, swift to claim him. "We'll keep you safe." Valen sat on the arm of the couch above his head, his presence a comfort as Cal slipped into the darkness. His brother's voice echoed in the black as he succumbed to it. "You two have a wraith to hunt and a woman to save." Chapter 31. Katerina didn't get a chance to see where she landed as she came out of the teleport still clutching Eli and Lisabetta. The second her feet touched the ground and her legs turned to noodles beneath her, she was hurled into a portal by the wraith. Had she wasted the last of her strength teleporting him and Lisabetta only for him to immediately take her back to the fight? She stumbled out of it and tripped, landing hard on golden gravel that told her she wasn't back at the gate, and breathing heavily as her entire body quaked, every inch of her trembling and weak. Teleporting before had left her shaky, but nothing like this. She felt on the verge of passing out, and that was something she couldn't allow to happen. She had to be on her guard. Fear pressed down on her, but she fought it as she mustered her strength, gathering the tattered remains of it for when she needed to defend herself. It wasn't a case of if. Eli and Lisabetta had brought her to a place other than the gate for a reason, and every fiber of her being was screaming that it was to kill her. She tried to lift her head as the wraith casually stepped out of the violet and black swirling smoke, his shoes appearing in view beside her. They halted. Katerina managed to edge her eyes upward. Lisabetta helped her by kicking her in the gut and flipping her onto her back, ripping a cry from her as pain blazed outwards from her side. She lay there a moment, Eli staring down at her, his violet eyes bright in the low light that came from in front of him, casting shadows in his sculpted cheeks and golden highlights in his short onyx hair. The buttons that ran in a line down the front of his tight black cotton coat, from his mandarin collar to his waist, glinted in the light as he moved to face her, canted his head, sighed. "I commend you." His low voice sent a tremor through her as his eyes narrowed on hers, brightening in a way that said he wasn't as impressed as his words sounded. He was angry. "It is rather noble of you to sacrifice yourself for the sake of those wretched gods. But I do not appreciate it, and I do not think they will either." "We should have returned to the gate," Lisabetta said as she scowled down at Katerina. Eli cast her a withering look, and Lisabetta lowered her head, settling her gaze on the gravel, making it clear who was in charge between them. "The gate is useless to us now." Eli's tone was hard as diamonds, black as night. "We would be outnumbered if we returned now, and there is no guarantee we could open the gate enough to cause the necessary breakdown of the barrier between this world and the underworld, even if we did manage to defeat the wretches." "Marek will be looking for her." Lisabetta sidled up to him and ran her hands over his shoulders, her breast threatening to spill from her elegant black dress as she pressed against his arm. "Perhaps we can use that to our advantage." The wraith frowned and his jaw flexed as he stared at Katerina for what felt like forever, and she fought her racing heart, trying to calm it. It was impossible when she felt sure she was about to die. Eli wanted her dead. It blazed in his eyes. She had known that would be her fate for interfering with their plans and buying Marek and his brother's time. But now that she was facing death, she wanted to live. Could she muster a barrier if he attacked her? She doubted that she could right now. And what good would it be if she managed it anyway? She was no match for Lisabetta and Eli, not if they worked together, not when she was alone. Part of her clung to what Lisabetta had said to her lover, hoping that he would listen to reason. The rest of her was strong enough to face whatever fate awaited her, because it was better she died than Marek came under attack again. If her sacrifice could buy him time to protect the gates and keep this world safe, she would gladly go through with it. "Very well. For now, we will keep her alive." Eli turned away from her. Katerina felt as if he had just announced her sentence, each word falling like a gavel as she sank against the gravel, head spinning and heart racing. She would have accepted death, but she couldn't accept this. She couldn't let him use her against Marek. Not again. She had to do something. She had teleported them away from Marek and his brothers in the hope of saving them and this world. She hadn't considered that Marek would come after her, or that the wraith would so easily turn this to his advantage, making her his captive again. Bait. She focused, trying to summon that feeling she had whenever she managed to teleport. Her body shook, muscles turning to liquid as she tried to force it, as she sagged when it was too much, had her heart laboring and breath sawing from her lips. Maybe if she had more time. She hated the thought of them using her as leverage against Marek, but it would give her the time she needed to regain her strength so she could teleport away from them, ruining their plans again. He nodded towards someone, dipping his head as they approached, gravel crunching beneath their feet. More than one pair of feet. How many had come to greet him? How many more were under his command? Katerina managed to muster enough strength to roll onto her front. Her vision grew hazy from the effort of moving, and when it cleared, she was looking at an enormous sandstone mansion with lights glowing in most of the windows on the 3 floors. And her brother. He was alive. She shoved to her knees and then her feet, regretted it when her head turned and she stumbled, somehow making it to the wall around the base of a circular fountain that stood in the middle of the driveway. "Guillaume," she breathed, her eyes darting over him, relief flooding her to give her strength as she saw that he was all right. He was more than all right. His cheeks had color and he was no longer gaunt, and the shadows around his eyes were gone, and she swore his hair was black now. Maybe it was just the light. He slowly shifted his gaze from Eli to her, where she sank against the wall of the fountain. Katerina looked at Eli as he walked towards her, towards Guillaume. "Let him go." She tried to grab Eli when he drew close to her, and he cast her a black look, one that had her lowering her hand to her lap, because it promised pain and retribution if she touched him, and she didn't want Guillaume caught in the crossfire. "You have me, and that's what Marek will respond to. Guillaume is of no use to you. Make him better as you promised, and let him go." The smile that curled Eli's lips chilled her to the bone. "I made him better." His deep voice rolled over her, each word ratcheting up the feeling inside her. Something wasn't right. Something was very wrong. Eli's violet gaze slid to Guillaume. "I do not think he wishes to go anywhere, though." She slowly looked from Eli to Guillaume, and a shiver raced down her spine, spreading over her arms and thighs as she noticed something. There was a violet corona around his hazel irises. "Your first error was believing your brother to be a vampire." Eli kept his gaze on her, drilling into the side of her face as she stared at her brother in disbelief. "It is not blood his fangs desire. It is a soul they crave, a soul his hunger needs to feed it." Guillaume's lips parted to reveal the barest hint of his fangs, fangs that seemed longer now. Dread pooled in her stomach, because he had fed. He was a wraith, and Eli had always known it. He had never meant to make her brother better, at least not in the way she had interpreted his words, the way she had wanted, freeing him of this curse. "Your second error was imposing your desires upon him." Eli's words sent another icy chill down her spine. She looked at Guillaume, into his eyes, and all of her hope died as she saw in them that Eli was right. "I never wanted what you did." Guillaume came to her and eased down into a crouch, but his eyes remained cold, devoid of the love they had once shown her. Disgust laced his voice as he stared at her. "I was so sick of you trying to fix me. Like I was broken." "No, it wasn't like that." She tried to touch him, but he reared back, rising to his full height to tower over her. "I wanted it because I love you, Guillaume." His eyes narrowed and the violet grew brighter as he bit out. "If you truly loved me, you would have helped me as Eli did. He made me whole, Katerina, and I'm glad of it. He set me free." "He didn't set you free, Guillaume. He's using you." "You don't know that." Guillaume snapped and his face darkened. "He helped me." And she hadn't. All this time, she had believed she had been helping him, but as she looked at him now, she could see all she had been doing was hurting him. She sank against the wall and fought the tears that wanted to come. "I have so much to learn about what I am, and Eli will teach me." For a moment, Guillaume looked as if he might soften towards her, but then all the warmth that had been building in his eyes vanished, and it was like she was looking at another person, and that sucked the soul right out of her. "I will." Eli came to stand before Guillaume, his expression holding a hint of pride as he looked at her brother. "Once we have dealt with the immediate threat, Your sister has one final use. She will lure the god to his doom, and this world there with it. Then we shall be truly free. The part of her that wanted to live, that wanted to protect this world and Marek and his brothers, rose to the fore, and she shot to her feet, coming to face Eli. No! She lunged for him, managed to land a blow on his right cheek before he could react. He swayed to his left, his jaw clenched, and she cocked her fist again, ready to deliver another blow. Guillaume grabbed her from behind and hauled her backwards as he hooked his arms under hers and pressed his hands to the back of her head, forcing it down, immobilizing her in a way she had taught him. "Damn you!" she spat at Eli as she struggled against Guillaume's hold, even when she knew it was futile. He was stronger than she was, the pressure of his grip crushing as he tightened it. Her fight fled her as the pain caught up with her. The thought that she had been hurting her brother all these years, and that now he was turning against her, stealing her strength. She sagged in his arms and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "We will take her to the gate in Seville." Eli straightened and she felt his glare on her, a dark malevolence that said he wanted to lash out at her as payment for what she had done. "Guillaume, don't do this. Don't listen to them. Please." She tried to turn her head to see her brother. "I'm sorry. Please, don't do this." Guillaume tightened his grip to the point of pain, and she cried out and arched forwards as much as she could, when it felt as if her spine would snap. When he eased the pressure, she sagged again, hanging limp from his arms. Seville? Gate? They were taking her back to where she had just been, even when Eli had said he wouldn't do such a thing. Violet and green flashes lit her boots and the gravel. The wraith was summoning a portal. She mustered her strength and struggled again, and when that got her nowhere, she bit out, "What use is a damaged gate to you?" She had seen it take a direct hit, and that look in Marek's eyes and the way his brother had leaped into action had told her they meant to do something to the gate. Heal it, close it. She wasn't sure, but she knew by now they'd had enough time to do whatever it was they had intended to do to it. A damaged gate. Eli's black leather riding boots appeared in her view, the tails of his coat settling around them as he halted. He chuckled, a cold and sinister sound. The gate in Seville is perfectly sound. The one we had hoped to penetrate was damaged. I admit it will be more difficult to succeed with the main gate, but when I drew up my plans for our operation here, I did not have you. Another gate? Eli leaned over and Guillaume eased his grip enough that she could lift her head and look at him, right into his violet eyes. He smiled, lifted his hand, and pinched her chin between his fingers and thumb, keeping her gaze on his. Now I have seen how he reacts to you. I know the god will open it to save your life. She twisted her head out of his grip and scowled at him. Being bait was bad enough. Being a hostage was entirely another thing, and she wouldn't go through with it. She focused on her body, on the strength that was slowly returning, and how she had felt when she had teleported, trying to build that same sensation inside her as she focused on Barcelona, on the cathedral there. Just as the image completed and the world around her wavered, as if it was about to disappear, Eli lifted a hand to her forehead and fire blazed across it. She cried out as the world grew solid again, as hot liquid ran down her nose and her cheeks, the coppery odor of it turning her stomach. Blood. Eli withdrew his hand and she stared at his crimson-stained claws as she fought to stop herself from throwing up, battled the pain and tried to push through it so she could teleport. Nothing happened. Eli cleaned his fingers on a crisp black handkerchief. It is a most useful ward. She reared back when he raised that same handkerchief to her face, but couldn't escape him. He dabbed around her forehead and she flinched with each sharp stab of pain, each sting that had her stomach turning because she had the sickening feeling that he had drawn something on her forehead using his claws. I admit, this development does cause a few difficulties. He lowered the cloth and tucked it back into his pocket as his eyes turned colder. Not for us, but for you. She stilled and stared at him, dread filling her again, pulling her insides down. You bloomed faster than I anticipated. Perhaps it was the stress of the situation. He looked to Lisabetta, who gracefully shrugged, and his gaze shifted back to Katerina. Katerina shook her head, refusing to believe what he was implying. I can be healed. A healer. It may have been possible once, perhaps a few days ago. No more. He looked her over, no remorse touching his features as he studied her. Now the remains of your life will play out as the ultimate beautiful tragedy. The god will foolishly open the gate to save you, damning this world and his one. And then he will forsake you once he realizes you will always be a demon. Katerina's heart sank at that. She told herself not to believe him, tried to push his words out of her mind and tell herself he was lying, and that even if he wasn't, it wouldn't turn out as he predicted. But she couldn't deny the truth. She had heard the hatred in Marek's voice when he had been fighting demons. She had seen it in his eyes when he had realized what she was. The hope that had ignited inside her when Persephone had announced she could be saved withered and died. Even if she could stop Eli and Lisabetta and save this world, she would end up with nothing. She had lost Guillaume, and she would lose Marek too. Everything worth fighting for in this world was gone, and she wasn't sure she could face seeing hatred in Marek's eyes again. Not when she had seen something else in them, something that burned inside her too. Love. Chapter 32. Escher appeared from the corridor that led towards the bedrooms on one side of the Tokyo mansion, adjusting the cuffs of his dove-gray shirt. Marek had wanted to head off right away to find Katerina by using his and his brother's new ability to sense when they were close to the Wraith, but Escher had needed a moment. Seeing Cal hurt and knowing that they were going after the Wraith and the Illusionist, two demons who had almost taken everything from Escher when they had killed Aiko, had sent his older brother skirting dangerously close to the edge. When Marek lost it, demons died and the earth shook, causing a minor quake in his locale. When Escher lost it, the seas ravaged the coasts, the rivers burst their banks, and torrential rain battered the lands, and not only in the locale. Escher losing it tended to result in the entire world suffering. So despite how desperately Marek wanted to find Katerina, he had given his brother a precious few minutes alone with Aiko. He had used the time to wash some of the blood off him, and then pace and go over everything, seeking a starting point for their hunt, one that might cut back on how much time it was going to take them to find Katerina. He needed her back in his arms, right this moment. He needed to know she was safe, because his chest felt too tight and he couldn't breathe without her. Ready? Escher drew down a deep breath, and Marek could see in his blue eyes that his brother wasn't ready, not yet. But he was willing to do this to help him. Marek went to nod, shook his head instead as that tight feeling became a tugging, irritating burn. He grimaced. What's wrong? Karis looked across at him over the cream couch where Valen and Eva were slumped together, both resting after the fight. A summons. Marek ground his teeth because he didn't need this, not right now. It isn't the gate either. Penitence? Diamond looked less than happy about that, his pale eyebrows knitting hard above ice-blue eyes that verged on white as he stared at Marek. Bitch goddess? The bitch goddess in question was Nemesis, a woman he and every one of his brothers despised. She took pleasure in punishing them whenever they broke a rule, her position as what amounted to the resident torturer on Mount Olympus giving her power over them that they couldn't deny. She held it over everyone in his world. Even the slightest indiscretion was met with a turn in her dark chamber, and 1,000 lashes of her barbed whip. Ares paid penitence every other week just because he couldn't keep his foul mouth in order, and had a bad habit of cursing in the language of the underworld, speaking it was forbidden in the mortal world and Olympus. Marek had somehow managed to wind up paying penitence only a few times since leaving the underworld. I can go. Karis took a step away from Callistos, where he slept soundly on the couch that faced the enormous TV. You go and find her. Marek shook his head. He appreciated his brother's offer, but he was responsible for what had happened. This summons for punishment was because he had lost the Twin Gate. It rested on his shoulders. It had been his duty to protect the Seville gates, and he had failed. Karis looked as if he wanted to argue, his green eyes revealing emotions for once. Because Karis had been the one to damage the gate when the illusionist had shown him something featuring Ennio? It wasn't Karras's fault, and Marek wouldn't let him take the blame for it. I won't be long. Marek looked to Escher. Be ready. We're leaving as soon as I get back. He stepped before anyone could argue, not bothering to go to Seville for his sword and vambraces, something that was usually required by Nemesis. She liked to see them and what armor they were allowed to have in the mortal world. Marek had long ago decided it was a sick quirk of hers. She liked knowing she had a son of Hades at her mercy, and that he was powerless to stop her from meting out her punishment even with his sword and shield. He landed in a dark chamber under a weak beam of light that made it even more difficult to see into the shadows. Marek looked down at the thick metal ring attached to the dark ground. Metal of the gods. He and Ares had bonded once about how much they hated that ring, because when he was bound to it, it wouldn't move no matter how much he struggled. It was another device, a method used by Nemesis to make him feel weak, and to make herself feel strong. He sucked down a steadying breath and kneeled before it, but no attempt to calm his nerves and the adrenaline flooding his veins would work. He knew it. Gods, he hated this. He had to do it, though. Ignoring a summons was a recipe for making his punishment worse, and the tugging, weakening sensation inside him wouldn't abate until Nemesis was satisfied he had paid his due. He couldn't go into battle with it niggling at him, stealing his focus. How many lashes are a suitable punishment for failing to uphold a duty? The haughty female voice rang in the darkness around him, and he kept his focus on that infernal metal ring before him, waiting for her to announce his sentence. 5,000? His brows drew down, and he couldn't stop himself from speaking, because that many lashes would leave him critically weakened, unable to go after Katerina. 1,000, he countered, and he knew he was on thin ice when she laughed, the empty sound echoing around the chamber. He had only ever heard her laugh when she was dealing pain, or thinking about dealing it. He waited for her to increase the amount as payment for his insolence in thinking he could negotiate the terms of his punishment. 2,000. It seems reasonable. I give your brother 1,000 lashes for that black tongue of his. Nemesis stepped into the sphere of pale light, her blood-red sandals a contrast against the black earth and the sheer layers of her onyx robe. He slowly lifted his head, needing to see that she was serious and was happy with that amount. A chill breeze swept from her, causing her black robes to flutter, the layers reaching towards him like tendrils of darkness. The gold filigree that formed a corset over her torso glinted in the light, the black fabric beneath it so thin he could almost see her nipples. She stepped closer, forcing him to tilt his head back, to look up at her where he knelt at her feet. At her mercy. Her cold red eyes glowed as she locked gazes with him, her crimson hair spilling around her slender shoulders as she slowly leaned over. Perhaps 3,000. 2. He should have leaped on the offer when she had made it. He wanted to say he had somewhere to be, but that would be a mistake. She would probably end up tripling the number of lashes just to detain him, punishing him for thinking something was more important than her. 2,000 it is. She eased to a crouch before him, and thick brown leather straps appeared in her delicate hands. Marek obediently held his hands out to her, wrists together, and remained still as she bound them to the ring. Her scarlet eyes glittered as she lifted them to meet his again, a flicker of pleasure that revealed how twisted she had become. She had probably been filled with glee when he had lost the gate, had probably been keeping track of the situation and urging him to fail, because she wanted to hurt him, because she wanted power over him. He shifted on his knees to get more comfortable. She moved around him, graceful, slow steps that had him wanting to yell at her to get on with it. Her fingers skimmed across his shoulders, sending a chill down his back, and paused on his spine. He jerked backwards when she tore the black t-shirt from him, shuddered as she stroked his back, and murmured, "It is almost a shame to ruin this." She was talking about his favor mark, a gift from the primordial goddess Gaia when he had been born. "It will heal," he grunted, "except for one scar." Nemesis would ensure one remained to remind him of his failure. When she touched him again, it was with cold metal, and he closed his eyes and bent his head, twisted the leather straps in his wrists and held on to them, steeling himself for her first strike. She stepped back. A whir sliced through the thick silence, and then his back. Lightning streaked up it where the metal whip had struck, and he gritted his teeth and muttered his first apology. She was quick to strike again, not giving him a chance to finish before another wave of fire ripped through him. Marek focused on the ring before him, on his hands where he gripped the leather, on what he needed to do when he escaped this torment. He muttered an apology whenever the whip lashed at him, counting each one, keeping track of them because Ares had warned him Nemesis had started to sneak in extra. The pain was bearable during the first 500 lashes, while Katerina filled his mind and he could think straight, focusing on his mission. But as they neared 1,000, his thoughts began to blur. The anticipation as the whip whistled and cut through the air, the agony as it slashed his back, and the fierce sting as sweat seeped into the cut all had his focus slipping. Katerina slipped away with it. He muttered another apology, unsure how many it was now, as the pain made it impossible to keep track. His head swam with it, and it took him several more lashes of the razor-sharp whip to realize the goddess was speaking to him. Her words wobbled in his ears, distorted at first, until he pieced them together. "The demons destroyed your amulet." He swallowed and nodded. "They revealed they are not the keys." He frowned but nodded again, admitting that he had failed in his duty and revealed that to the demons. His thoughts blurred together as the whip cut up his back, catching him in his ribs this time. He wavered, his grip slackening before he roused himself. He couldn't pass out. "It was your duty to keep it hidden that you and your brothers are the keys of Hades." Another nod. He sagged forwards as she struck again, the force of it blinding him, and grunted this time, unable to hold it back as pain ricocheted through his aching body. "You are far more amiable than your brother Ares." She struck him again, making her words distort in his ears. "And far less difficult than Keris." Another strike. He sucked down a breath and issued an apology, the words slurred as they left his lips. It seemed enough for her. She struck him again, and he slurred another one. "Getting a reaction from Keris often proves difficult. He does not respond to physical pain." Another lash, another grunt ripped from his lips, this one accompanied by a wave of nausea that rolled up on him so swiftly, he was sure he was going to vomit. When the wave receded, Marek made sense of her words and uttered another apology. Keris didn't respond to physical pain? What sort of punishment did she give him then? What pain did she deliver? The whip whistled through the air, and he arched forwards as it lashed him, cutting over his right shoulder and down to his left hip, shattering his ability to think. He apologized on autopilot and waited for the next blow. It didn't come. "We are done." Nemesis rounded him, her scarlet eyes glowing with satisfaction, pleasure he had given her with his pain. He gritted his teeth, clenching them so hard they creaked under the pressure, and tried to pull his wrists apart to break the bonds. His arms shook, every muscle on his body tensing and flexing, trembling as he tried harder. They didn't give. Nemesis crouched before him, no trace of sympathy in her eyes. "You seem weaker than usual." Weaker than usual? That barb cut deeper than the 2,000 lashes she had delivered, and he growled as darkness surged through him. The ground trembled beneath him as he clenched his fists and pulled his wrists apart. The worn leather gave this time, one strap ripping open, and he twisted his arm free and tore at the other strap, pulling it off his other arm. He staggered to his feet and glared at the goddess. "Do not question my strength again." She rose to her feet, and a hint of a smile tugged at her lips, the satisfaction that glowed in her crimson eyes deepening. She was pleased she had angered him, provoking a reaction. If she hoped it would get him back at her mercy for another 1,000 lashes, she was mistaken. His penitence was done. He could say whatever he liked to her at this point, and there was nothing she could do about it. But he had nothing to say to her. He mustered his strength and stepped, teleporting back to the Tokyo mansion. Rather than landing inside the main living space, he landed in the courtyard nestled between the three sides of the building, close to the broad stone steps that led up onto the covered wooden deck that ran around it. Escher growled the moment his blue eyes landed on him. "I'm fine." Marek wasn't, but he needed to keep his brother from slipping into the darkness. Ares stood just beyond Escher, his brown eyes awash with concern, that only increased as Megan bustled past him, her deep scarlet t-shirt and blue jeans a contrast to his all-black clothing. Her chocolate eyes widened as they landed on Marek, and her dark ponytail bounced as she hurried towards him. Marek held his hand up to stop her. She scowled at him in a way that said that wasn't going to happen. I know all about penitence, and I'm damned if I'm going to let you go out like this. It's barbaric. It's the rules, he countered. Beyond her, Ares rolled his eyes in a way that warned he wasn't going to get his way. None of them were. Sweetheart. Ares started, but she turned her glare on him, and he sighed deeply. His voice dropped low as he reached for her, worry creasing his brow. Healing us weakens you. The babe? Escher looked from Ares to Megan, and his eyes darkened, black edging out the blue. You cannot. The babe. The determination in Megan's eyes wavered, and she crossed the short span of wooden deck to Escher, looked as if she wanted to touch his arm, and glanced at Ares. Ares frowned at her hand, sparks of red and gold flickering in his eyes. She settled for smiling at Escher instead of touching him. A wise move. Ares was feeling protective enough without her provoking his darker side, the one that was liable to make him attack Escher if she laid a finger on him. The baby will be fine, she said to Escher, and then looked at Ares and Marek. It will be fine. I'll only heal the deeper wounds. You can't let Marek go after Katerina like this. A war erupted in Escher's eyes. Not what Marek needed. His brother felt deeply protective of his family, and now Megan was asking him to choose between endangering the baby by allowing her to heal Marek, or endangering Marek by allowing him to go into what was bound to be a battle while he was injured and weakened. I'm making a decision here, and no one is going to change my mind. I know the rules. I'll only heal the deepest wounds. If I feel anything is wrong, I'll stop. She planted her hands on her hips and stared each of them down in turn. But I am doing this. Ares looked as if he wanted to argue, or possibly teleport her away so she couldn't go through with her plan. Won't you rest a while? Ares said, hope building in his eyes. Marek destroyed it by shaking his head. He didn't want Megan risking herself by healing him either, and resting would heal the worst of his wounds, but only if he slept for a few hours. I've lost too much time already. Marek looked from Ares to Megan. I don't need to be healed. I'll be fine. Escher looked as if he wanted to argue and force him to either rest or allow Megan to heal him. He stopped his brother with a well-aimed glare and stepped onto the deck. He banked right, following the path towards the wing of the building where the showers were. Oh, you overbearing... Megan's voice came from behind him. Ares rumbled, I'm not letting you see my brother naked. You want to heal him, you wait here. Marek took a left when he reached the first bedroom and followed the wall around it to the bathhouse. He stripped off, set the shower running, and stepped under the spray, flinching as the warming water hit the lacerations on his back and sides. He stared down at his bare feet, watching the crimson waters swirling around them into the drain. The moment it ran clear, he switched the water off, dried himself as best he could without disturbing the healing wounds, and pulled his clothes back on. He stormed back through the main living area of the house, passing the kitchen and the long, low dining table, his gaze fixed on the corridor to the left of the TV area. He just needed to grab a t-shirt, and then he and Escher could go. Megan and Iko stepped into his path, a formidable wall despite the difference in height and build between him and them. The hard edge to their matching dark eyes said he wasn't going to get past them, not without using what little energy he had to teleport. He looked at Ares and Escher, silently asking his brothers to weigh in. Ares just shrugged. Clearly, whatever war he had waged while Marek had been in the shower, Megan had been the victor. Make it quick. Marek turned his back to the two women. Only the deepest cuts. And you stop if you feel tired. Ares stomped past him, heading for Megan. She huffed. I already said I would. Stop coddling me. Ares grumbled. Never gonna happen. Get used to it. She sighed, and her voice softened. I know. Just lend me some strength. You got it, baby. Marek could picture his brother behind Megan, kneading her shoulders in that way he always did when she was healing one of them, monitoring her vitals and offering encouragement, support that she seemed to relish. They made a good team. Marek's thoughts turned to Katerina. They made a good team, too. The way they had fought against the vampires together had been incredible, working as a unit to swiftly deal with them. It wasn't only fighting beside her that felt right, though. All of it did. She was the perfect partner for him, one who enjoyed tracking and surveillance, fighting and working to protect something, to save something, like he should be working to save her right now. He needed her back in his life, safe in his arms. Are you done? He was sure Megan had only managed to heal a few of his wounds in the time he had been lost in his thoughts, and Aiko had cleaned some of the others in preparation, but he needed to get going. He couldn't stand idle any longer. Let me just do this one. Megan sounded tired already. Guilt lanced him and he turned away from her, breaking contact before she could funnel her power into him. She looked pale, but fire shone in her eyes as she frowned at him. No more. He put it out there before she could protest and lifted his eyes to Aries where he towered behind her, silently asking him to stop her if she tried, because he didn't want her to endanger herself or the baby on his account. Aries nodded and palmed her shoulders through her red t-shirt. Let him go. You did good, sweetheart. She huffed. I could do more, but I'm starting to get the impression you're not the only overbearing man I have to put up with for the next few months. I'm not the only overbearing man you'll be putting up with for the next few decades. Aries grinned and wrapped his arms around her. You think I'm bad now? Wait until you deliver this baby. Father is going to lock you and the kid in a padded room under around 1,000 layers of wards. She pulled a face. That is so not happening. No one is going to dictate what I do, not even Hades. The ground beneath them trembled. Everyone looked at Marek. He shook his head. Not me. Mother was a little upset when she realized you were pregnant. Father wants to see you and Megan. When the hell did you see them and how long have I not known this? Aries waved him away, closed his eyes, and sighed as he shook his head. Gods, I'm going to be in a world of trouble. You know he'll think I've been ignoring his summons. Things were a bit crazy. Marek rubbed his forehead. I forgot, all right? Go. Karis nodded towards him. We can handle things here. Aries sighed again, gathering Megan into his arms and looked down into her eyes. Maybe he can wait a little longer. He was stalling. Marek could understand why. Megan was tired from healing him, and the teleport to the underworld would drain her further. Not only that, but Aries probably didn't want to be the one to explain what had happened to the twin gate. Not when Megan meeting their parents and officially announcing her pregnancy should be a happy occasion. Go after I've had time to explain what happened. Marek stepped up to his brother and laid a hand on his shoulder, not looking forward to the prospect of using a messenger to tell his father about what had happened to the gate, or the inevitable summons that would follow. We could use Megan here for now, just in case. There was no just in case about it. It was going to come down to a fight, and he was going to win it. Chapter 33. Marek tried to ignore the dark things Escher grumbled under his breath as they came out of the teleport on the hill above the twin gate. He was losing patience, too. So far they had visited the house where Marek had been held again, had been to Katerina's apartment in Barcelona, and had tried several other locations. They hadn't found even a trace of the wraith, and the night was wearing on. It had been just before sunset when they had started their search. Now it was after midnight. In only a few more hours, it would be daylight and his chances of finding the wraith would be reduced to 0. The demon would go into hiding until night fell again. Escher had noticed his unease and had announced he was sure he would be able to sense him even if he had moved on recently, so they had agreed to return to the twin gate to see if that was true. It had been 24 hours since they had been here. If Escher could feel the wraith's presence still, there was a chance they could somehow decipher where he had gone. Could they track him? The bastard's portal didn't leave any trace of him behind, but it had been Katerina who had teleported him and the illusionist away from the battle. Maybe it had left a trail they could follow. He approached the brow of the hill and his senses sparked, his internal radar warning him that they weren't alone. Marek eased forwards, not wanting to alert whoever was below them to their presence. Escher walked right to the edge of the bushes and glared down into the dusty valley below. There went the element of surprise. But then Escher didn't need to be subtle when he could command blood to do his bidding. It took a powerful being to resist Escher's control over water. Whoever was in the valley below wasn't strong enough to do that. If Escher wanted them dead, they wouldn't stand a chance. Marek came up beside him. frowned at the lone figure clad in tight black trousers, polished leather riding boots, and a short black tunic that hugged his lean frame. "What's a messenger doing here?" Escher said, loud enough the male heard. His shoulders stiffened as his head whipped towards them, his mismatched eyes widening before they narrowed, and he cautiously eased back a step. Everything in Marek said the male was going to run. He stepped before it could happen, landing right behind him. The male pivoted to face him and stumbled back a step. "Did father send you?" Marek looked him over, avoiding his green and blue eyes. He was dressed like a messenger in Marek's family's service, the silver detailing on the cuffs and around the fastenings of his tunic unique to Hades' team of them. He hadn't sent word about the gate to his father yet, but Hades was linked to them, was probably already aware of what had happened. He stared at the male, hoping he was wrong and he wasn't about to be delivered a demand from his father to return to the underworld to explain himself, because he didn't need another delay. He needed to find Katerina. The male shook his head, backed off a step, only to go rigid when he bumped into Escher. Escher canted his head, curiosity shimmering in his dark blue gaze as he studied the back of the male's head. "Not sent by our father, but wearing the finery of our family." Escher stepped around him, each slow one seeming to ratchet up the messenger's tension. The more Marek looked at him, the more familiar he felt, which was ridiculous. All of the creepy bastards looked like each other. Of course he would appear familiar. The sensation he had seen this one in particular before stayed with him, though, as the messenger glanced at the gate, or where it had been. Marek couldn't feel it anymore, and that was unsettling. It felt as if he had lost something, a part of him. "Who do you work for?" Marek closed ranks with Escher, forming a wall before the messenger. The male's gaze darted to his boots. "No one." Marek frowned at that. "Messengers work for someone. All of you have owners. I've never heard of one of your kind not having one." His words slowed as reason the male might not have a master hit him. Escher beat him to it. "You were one of Calendria's." Marek looked the messenger over again, this time noticing how he kept glancing at where the gate had been, his mismatched eyes holding something surprising. And he had never considered what had happened to the ones who had been in Calendria's service when she had died. "We had to close it." He caught the flare of hurt in the male's eyes just before he shut them. "I know. I felt it." His words were quiet, a bare whisper that Marek's heightened hearing struggled to catch. He could understand the male's reluctance to talk. Messengers were only supposed to relay whatever had been told to them and no more. They weren't meant to feel or speak their own thoughts. It was part of the reason they had always made him feel uneasy. They had felt soulless, an automaton. But this one was different. "Where have you been since Calendria died?" He had an inkling he knew where. The messenger confirmed it when he snapped, "She did not die. She was murdered." And it had sent this male off the rails for some reason. He turned away from Marek and stared at where the gate had been, his perfect features darkening for a heartbeat before sorrow swamped them. Marek knew that feeling. He felt as if they had just lost her all over again, too. "Who do you serve now?" Marek braced himself when the male turned on him, his green and blue irises bright in the darkness. "I serve Calendria," he barked and curled his hands into fists. "I will only ever serve her." It dawned on Marek that he and his brothers weren't the only ones searching for a way to bring her back. The rage Marek could see building inside the messenger deflated again as the male looked back at the empty ground where the gate had once been hidden. "She was the only person who viewed me as something with worth," the male murmured, his voice distant and quiet. "She was meant for me. We were meant to be together. We will be together." The male disappeared before Marek could stop him. He looked at Escher. Escher's black eyes remained fixed on where the male had been, and Marek could easily read his thoughts in them. How was a messenger going to achieve that? And like hell they would let one end up with their sister. "You think he stands a chance?" Escher's blue eyes slid to him. Marek shook his head. "But what if we could do more for her?" Those blue eyes began to brighten, turning the color of a summer's sky. "If we can somehow do more than just find her soul and see it safely to the Elysian fields, then she won't be allowed out of the house for at least a century. And even then, either me, you, or one of our brothers will be going with her everywhere. because Marek was damned if he was going to let anything happen to her again. He took a step towards the fractured ground where the gate had been, and froze when he felt a tug in his chest. Not now. He reached for his pocket, intending to fire off a message to one of his brothers, asking them to deal with the Seville gate for him, and stopped as a feeling went through him. What is it? Escher closed ranks with him again. The gate is calling. He lifted his head and locked gazes with his brother, seeing in them that he'd had the same thought. It wasn't a hellspawn wanting to travel to or from the underworld. It was a trap. Light flared across his vision, dimming as Escher turned his phone towards him. It cast a cold glow in his brother's eyes as his thumb danced over the screen, the charms that hung from one corner of the device swaying with each word he typed. It took Escher only a few seconds to finish his message, send it, and pocket his phone. His brother had become an expert typist over the last few weeks, since meeting Aiko. Apparently, when the full and new moon had him in its grip and Escher was confined to the house, Aiko often stayed with her parents. And they messaged each other like it was a competition to see who could send the most during their time apart. Escher gripped Marek's wrist before he could say anything and stepped with him. Marek appreciated the assist. He needed to conserve his strength in case his gut feeling was right and they were heading into a battle. His pulse picked up pace as the darkness whirled around him, adrenaline pouring through his veins as he steeled himself, attempting to prepare for whatever lay ahead, even the worst he could imagine. His boots hit solid ground and the darkness evaporated to reveal the shadowy park, and he was glad Escher had chosen to teleport them into a corner of the square, away from where the gate was hiding. At this distance, it wouldn't respond to him. He looked beyond Escher. Relief and dread hit him in equal measure. Katerina stood beside the elegant low octagonal fountain in the middle of the open square in the Parque de Maria Luisa, her back to it and the palms and deciduous trees that enclosed the large space. She wasn't alone. Guillaume stood beside her, clutching her arm so tightly that her skin blanched where his fingers pressed into her flesh. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks glistened with tears. On her forehead, some bastard had carved a ward. Her dull gaze remained fixed on the golden path at her feet even as Eli moved around her, his long black coat swirling around his ankles as he paced. Who had done this to her, the Wraith or her brother? Marek was familiar with betrayal, could spot when someone else was feeling it. Guillaume had turned against her. It was the only reason she would look so crushed, so broken, so ready to give up on life and accept death. Her brother lifted one booted foot to rest on the brown and white chevron tiles that covered the base of the fountain, leaned close to Katerina's ear and brushed the tangled strands of her caramel hair from it. She tensed and flinched as he hissed into her ear. Be thankful we aren't killing you now. You've outlived your usefulness and failed us. It took all of Marek's strength to resist the urge to sprint along the path that led to the fountain, one of many that formed rays coming from it, and attack him for that. Escher laid a hand on his arm. His brother had sensed Marek's rising fury and meant to hold him back. Well, it wasn't going to happen. Sense told him to wait for his brothers, but his heart roared at him to save Katerina. He shirked Escher's grip and stepped out onto the broad, box-hedge-lined path that cut straight towards the fountain. Escher muttered something and followed him, and he appreciated the backup because he was going to need it. Eli slowed to a halt and casually turned to face Marek as he approached. You know how this will go. The Wraith shifted his gaze to Katerina. Guillaume squeezed her arm so hard she cried out, the sound echoing around the park and ripping a hole in Marek's chest, as he fought the instinct to lunge for her and tear her from her brother's grasp. Eli's cold smile said he had seen through Marek's facade and knew he wanted to save her, that he would do anything to achieve that. The Wraith's violet gaze drifted from her to Marek. Open the gate, or she dies. Chapter 34. Open the gate, or she dies. Katerina's doll eyes suddenly widened and she came to life, going from a compliant doll to a fierce tigress in the blink of an eye. Don't do it! She kicked forwards and glared over her shoulder at Guillaume when he yanked her back. She struggled against his hold, her heart racing in Marek's ears as she turned her wild gaze on him and his brother. There's no saving me. It's too late. We can't reverse what was done." He stared at her in disbelief as those words sank in, and he saw in her eyes that she meant them. She truly believed that she would be a demon forever. He could also see she believed it meant that whatever they had together was now over. What poison had Eli been dripping in her ears since she had interfered with his plans and teleported him and Lisabetta away from the battle at the Twin Gate? Whatever it had been, it had had the desired effect on Katerina, stealing all hope from her. "It's pointless." She shook her head, her hazel eyes pleading him to listen. "They want to ruin this world. Your world. I can't let them do that." Her brother slapped a hand over her mouth and dragged her back against him. She wrestled with him, but her eyes quickly glazed over, her cheeks reddening as she struggled for air. She slumped against his chest, and Marek bit back a growl as he focused all of his senses on her to check she was all right. "The female will do much to protect you, it seems. Even lie. And I can see she means something to you. Are you really willing to sacrifice her to protect the gates?" Eli's baritone rolled over him like thunder. A storm built inside Marek in response. His mind ran at 1,000,000 miles per hour, calculating outcomes and looking at the situation from every angle imaginable. Where he stood now was far away enough that the gate wouldn't open. The demons needed him closer so they could attack the gate once it appeared. They were banking on him or his brother attempting to take Katerina. He guessed the ward on her forehead prevented her from teleporting, but she had other powers at her disposal, ones that could provide her with protection in a battle if he could get her free of her brother. Escher was already on edge beside him, probably because the illusionist was nowhere to be seen. Marek, like his antsy brother, refused to believe that meant she wasn't going to be involved in the fight, and remained on guard, ready for anything she might construct to use against him and Escher. As soon as it looked like he or his brother would attack or the demons were in danger of losing, Eli would build a portal for her to appear through and take them down with an illusion. Or was Eli waiting for the gate to appear before he did it? Illusions would keep him and Escher occupied, and his proximity to the gate would keep it visible. Vulnerable. The sensible thing to do was leave. But he couldn't. He stared at Katerina, across the distance that felt vast between them. The Wraith was right. She meant something to him, and he needed her back in his arms. It would happen, but she wasn't going to be happy about his means of getting her there. He shrugged, aiming for casual. "She's a demon now. What do I want with a demon?" He couldn't bring himself to call her filthy, not when his gaze met hers. Her eyes widened and tears lined them, and he cursed himself, hating having to do this to her. He would make it up to her when he had her safely away from his enemy. He would make her see that this was all a lie, a ploy to keep her and the gate safe. He took a step back. "The only reason I came here was to open the gate for someone worthy of being in my presence. But now that you are in my way, I think I will make them wait. They will probably go to another gate." Another step. Unless whoever was waiting on the other side was in on things, of course. It was tempting to open the gate to see if anyone came through. It couldn't be a coincidence that the gate had summoned him, and Eli had been waiting here. The suspicion that they were working with someone on the inside, someone who could move through the underworld with ease, deepened. He took another step backwards. Eli's violet eyes brightened, anger flaring in them. Marek wanted to grin at the fact he had finally provoked a response, was on his way to tipping the scales in his favor by making the demon lose his temper. The air behind Marek cooled. The hair on his nape rose in response. Or maybe he was only tipping it more in the demon's favor by forcing his hand. Darkness built around him, a black mansion constructing itself stone by stone before him, blotting out the park and Katerina, and his enemy. Before the final stone could fall into place, an unholy shriek pierced his ears, and it exploded. He flinched away, bringing his arms up to shield his face as he twisted, waiting for the rubble to hit him. When it didn't, and another black snarl pealed through the air like thunder, he lowered his arms and looked at Eli. The demon's eyes were bright violet as he bared his fangs, his eyes fixed on something to Marek's right. Marek looked there. Escher held Lisabetta to the floor, pinning her beneath him, his left hand closed around her throat. Her cheeks were red and blotchy as she struggled, legs kicking wildly, heels tearing at the satiny material of her black dress. Her silver eyes swirled, wide and desperate as she clawed at Escher's arms and battered his face, trying to force his brother off her. Escher didn't even react. He bore down on her, pressing more weight on her throat, his expression devoid of emotion as he grinned, flashing his own long fangs as his black eyes gained a crimson corona. Escher lifted his head and fixed his gaze on Eli. "I can see she means something to you." His brother parroted Eli's words. "Are you really willing to sacrifice her?" Lisabetta's struggles increased, her legs thrashing as she raked claws down Escher's arms, drawing blood. Eli stared down at her, his face slack and eyes empty. He was going to let Escher kill her. She seemed to sense it and started kneeing Escher in the back as her silver eyes brightened. Pieces of scenery built and collapsed around Marek as she desperately tried to conjure an illusion, none of it holding as she desperately tried to breathe. Eli was suddenly behind Escher, digging claws into his shoulder and hauling him off the dark violet-haired female. She gasped in air, her chest bowing off the dirt as her arms fell to her sides. "Kill her!" Eli snapped. Katerina cried out. Marek burst into action when he realized the demon had been talking to Guillaume, trusting his brother would keep Eli and Lisabetta distracted so he could save Katerina. He turned towards her, intending to sprint to her, cursing the fact he couldn't muster another teleport right now, not without dramatically weakening himself and making himself vulnerable. He froze when he caught sight of her, his heart aching as fiercely as hers must have been. Hurt shone in Katerina's eyes. "Please, don't do this." She struggled against her brother's hold, and Guillaume looked down at her, hesitation etched on his face and something flaring in his eyes, something that looked a lot like regret. For a heartbeat, Marek felt sure her brother wouldn't go through with it. "I said kill her!" Eli barked, more force behind those two words this time, enough to jolt Guillaume into action. Guillaume tensed, swallowed hard, and gripped her caramel hair with one hand. He pulled her head to her left as she frantically fought him and raised his claws to strike. Marek's heart lodged in his throat and he kicked off. Escher appeared behind Guillaume in a swirl of black smoke and tore him backwards as he shoved Katerina forwards, separating the two and sending her stumbling towards Marek. Both Escher and Guillaume disappeared. He heard them land behind him, caught Katerina as she sank to her knees and eased her down. "Stay here." He smoothed his hand across her forehead, over the ward, the fire burning in his blood blazing hotter at the sight of it. He risked a teleport just as a bright purple light pierced the darkness, stepping away from the gate so it wouldn't have a chance to start opening. He appeared in front of Eli as the demon looked in the direction of the gate, and used as much of his power as he could spare to summon a dome over it. The baked earth walls were thin as it went up, weak enough that the demons could break through it given the chance, but it would protect the gate and might stop it from reacting to him if he got too close to it. Escher held his hand out and the pipes beneath the park burst. Water shot into the air all around them, saturating Marek in a heartbeat, soaking the ground and turning the path to slippery mud. The water droplets swirled together, gathering into one long stream that suddenly sped towards the dome. And Katerina. He cursed his brother as icy claws sank into his heart and looked over his shoulder, taking his eyes off Guillaume and Eli as his chest tightened. The fear pounding through him eased as he saw the water curving around Katerina, avoiding her as it formed another protective wall around the gate. Using his powers in such a way and having to constantly control the water would drain Escher. They would have to end this fight quickly before Escher ran out of strength, or his focus shattered and the water dropped to hit the earth dome, weakening it. Katerina crawled away from it and lowered to cover where she had been, sealing the dome in completely. The water picked up speed as it grew deeper, ripped at the blue and white chevron tiles on the benches set into the box hedges. Debris swirled within the water, the dirt it picked up turning it murky. Guillaume leaped onto Marek's back and he turned with him, grabbed his arm and threw him over his head, sending him flying into one of the statues that stood at four corners of the park. The male dropped to the dirt and didn't move. Escher seized hold of the illusionist again, his short black claws sinking deep into her throat as he held her in front of him, between him and the wraith. Eli bared his fangs and a short black and violet blade appeared in his hand. Marek raised his hand and thick shards of rock shot from the ground like spikes. Eli leaped backwards, glaring at him as he evaded each one. His violet eyes flared brighter as the distance between him and Lisabetta grew. She struggled in Escher's grip, and whatever illusion she was casting, it was angering his brother. Crimson invaded his black eyes. His lips peeled off his razor-sharp fangs. Was she trying to push him over the edge? "Whatever she is putting in your mind, it is all lies, brother." Marek grabbed his shoulder and shook him. When that didn't rouse him, Marek risked it. He seized Lizabeta and yanked her from his brother's grip, twisted her into his arms and into a chokehold that had her gasping for air as his forearm closed over the front of her throat. Escher turned crimson-edged eyes on him. They narrowed, and Marek gritted his teeth as he felt the blood slowing in his veins, his heart laboring as the flow of it became dangerously weak. "Escher!" He gritted and struggled to keep his grip on Lizabeta as she lashed out at him, clawing and kicking him. Escher snarled low. Marek's vision wobbled. Maybe taking Lizabeta had been a terrible mistake. It might have freed his brother of the illusion, but it had also pushed him close to the edge of losing control, because he had taken Escher's prey from him. "Escher!" He tried again. When his blood felt as if it was growing thicker in his veins and Escher looked ready to finish him off, he hurled Lizabeta at his brother, hoping it would appease him and stop him from killing him. Escher grinned and caught her, sank claws into her shoulders, and stared deep into her eyes. Whatever she saw there, it tore a scream from her throat. "Lizabeta!" Eli lunged for her. Marek backhanded him. He wanted to kill him, but they needed one of them alive for questioning, and Eli was higher up the chain of command. Plus, Escher had a score to settle with Lizabeta. "You killed her," Escher snarled, his voice darker than Marek had ever heard it as he struggled to speak. He sucked down one ragged breath and then another, the crimson in his eyes spreading as his countenance changed, all of the light leaving it as his other side, the vicious and terrible one that had been born centuries ago in the wake of Escher being held captive and tortured, rose to the fore. "You killed Iko!" Eli lunged for Lizabeta again, ducked and disappeared as Marek lashed out at him to stop him from interfering. Escher bellowed. Eli loomed behind him, grinning as he pulled the dagger from Escher's shoulder and raised it to strike again. Marek stepped and pulled Escher to one side. The blade struck. Lizabeta screamed. Eli staggered backwards, his hand slipping from the hilt of the dagger as his eyes widened, his lips parting as he stared at her. She sank to her knees, raised trembling hands, and clutched the hilt where it protruded from the left side of her chest. "Lizabeta!" Eli recovered and reached for her. She grunted and inched the blade from her flesh, her gasping cries filling the night. Escher didn't give her a chance to remove it. He broke free of Marek's grip and slammed his palm against it, driving it deeper into her chest. Eli yelled, "Lizabeta!" He kicked off, his eyes blazing with fury as they landed on Escher's back. Escher hauled Lizabeta onto her feet and twisted to face Eli, using her as a shield as she weakly fumbled with the hilt of the blade, her fingers slipping in all the black blood as it cascaded from the wound. "Talk, and maybe I will spare her." Escher cupped her jaw, keeping her head up as it lolled. Her hand slipped from her chest, falling lax at her side. Escher angled his head away from her and looked down at her face. He jostled her, frowning when she didn't respond, a flicker of confusion in his near-crimson eyes. "Escher." Marek edged towards him. He kept shaking her, harder and harder when she didn't respond. "Escher." His brother looked at him, too far gone to comprehend what he had done. Eli understood it all too well. On a vicious roar, he launched at Escher while his brother was distracted, another blade materializing in his hands. Marek pulled Escher backwards and tried to teleport. Nothing happened. He had used too much of his power already. All he could do was watch as Eli sailed towards his brother, murder in his eyes, and Escher refused to budge, kept looking at Lizabeta where she hung limp from his arms, as if she was miraculously going to spring back to life as he wanted. Marek focused on the earth and put all of his strength into summoning a wall, his heart racing as time slowed, as Eli plunged the blade towards Escher and his heart lurched into his throat. Too late. His heart felt as if it would stop as the blade met Escher's chest. It did stop when a wall of blue hexagonal glyphs shimmered across the air, spreading outwards from the point of the blade where it had halted just an inch from Escher's body. Escher finally roused himself, a low growl rumbling through him as he discarded the dead demon and narrowed his eyes on the wall of glyphs, and then turned his glare on Katerina. Marek leaped into his path before he could even think about attacking her. "She's on our side." Escher's crimson to black eyes pierced right through him, remaining fixed on Katerina. Eli rallied and attacked again. Escher shot his right hand out, closed it around Eli's throat before he could land a blow, and twisted with him, slamming his back into the ground. The demon's breath left him on impact, and he disappeared. Escher's knee hit the dirt where the demon had been, another dissatisfied snarl leaving him as he realized his quarry had escaped. Marek intercepted Eli as he appeared again, sweeping in between him and Escher before he could attack his brother. He blocked the arm Eli held the blade in as he lunged at him, knocking it aside and gaining some space, and reared back as a blade flew between them, cutting across his vision. It snapped into Escher's hand and he kicked off, swiping at the demon, driving him back past Lisabetta's body. Eli's eyes dropped to her and he snarled, the pained sound filling the thick night air. The wraith stopped evading Escher and attacked, his strikes swift and vicious as his lips peeled back off his teeth and his eyes glowed violet. Marek joined his brother, working with him to block blows and wear the demon down, waiting for the right opening, one where he could land a blow without being cut with the demon's blade. But it was Escher who began to slow as they danced around the square, his movements growing sluggish, each swipe with the blade he had pulled from Lisabetta's body weaker than the last. Blood tracked down Escher's back from his shoulder. Cold realization slid down Marek's spine. "Go home!" Marek shouted as he moved around behind Eli, trying to keep the demon away from his brother, even when he was aware it was too late. Escher's eyes verged on scarlet, his other side rising to the fore as the wound the wraith had dealt him continued to weaken him. He needed to get his brother away from the wraith before the poison the blade had delivered could kill him. The last time the wraith had stabbed Escher, it had taken all of Megan's strength to reverse the damage and save him. "Escher!" When his brother didn't listen, Marek pulled his phone from his pocket and fired off a message as quickly as he could manage. Escher lunged for Eli, landing a hard blow on the demon, one that staggered him. His brother followed it with another, slashing across the male's chest and carving a line through the breast of his black coat. He attacked again as Eli struggled to shake off the blow to his head, but stumbled at the last second, his left knee giving out and sending him to the ground. Eli slowly smiled. The blade tumbled from Escher's hand as he shook his head, the finger-length strands of his black hair falling to cover one side of his face. He sank forwards, planting his hands against the golden dirt, and swallowed hard. Marek whipped his hand out and focused on the fallen dagger. It shot into his palm, and he closed his fingers over it as he kicked off, lunging at Eli. The wraith was swift to leap backwards, evading the strike Marek aimed at his neck. He just needed to buy more time. He willed Diamond to move his arse. Marek struck with all of his strength at every opportunity he got, driving Eli away from Escher as his brother began to move again, low growls and snarls rumbling from him as he clawed at the earth. "Hurry, Diamond," Marek muttered and lashed out at Eli, catching him across his left shoulder. He twisted and spun around the demon, landing another blow that cut up his back, slowly weakening him. He sensed it when his brother appeared. Escher must have felt it too, because an unholy roar left him and he barreled into Marek, knocking him aside and lunged at Eli. "Fucking hell," Diamond bit out. "Escher's message said he had this. This is not having it." "Damn it." Marek tried to get up but hit the dirt again when Escher slammed a boot into his chest, knocking the wind from him. He wheezed as it felt as if someone had just caved his ribs in on his lungs and fought for air. He had thought Escher had messaged for backup. He should have known his brother would see this as an opportunity to hunt, his other side driven to claim his prey without anyone interfering. "Thought he called for backup." Marek eased onto his knees. Diamond scowled at Escher's back as he fought the wraith, landing blows with his claws and bare fists, battering the demon. "He'll kill him." Marek staggered onto his feet. "Stop him." Diamond's ice-blue eyes widened and slid to Marek. "I don't really fancy my chances. We need him alive. Calendria." It was all Marek needed to say. Diamond was moving in a split second. He disappeared and reappeared behind Escher as their brother brought his claws down in a fast arc towards the demon's neck. Diamond grabbed him from behind, throwing his aim off. "Escher, Diamond murmured, his voice soft despite how violently he was wrestling with Escher, trying to get him under control as he fought to break free. Marek shoved off, moving as quickly as he could towards Eli. "We need him alive." Diamond edged his hand up. Escher snarled and snapped his fangs at it when it came close to his face, twisted and elbowed Diamond in the side of the head, knocking him away. "Wraith dies." Escher turned cold eyes on Diamond. "You die if you interfere." Diamond planted his hands on his hips and his white eyebrows met hard above his glittering frosty eyes. "You gonna kill me? I don't think so. Maybe you need to take a nap." Escher bared his fangs and kicked off, springing away from Diamond, towards Eli. Marek leaped into his path and took the blow meant for the demon, gritting his teeth as Escher's claws slashed across his chest, fire erupting in the wake of them. Escher stilled. His red eyes regained a sliver of black as he stared at the wounds on Marek's chest. Eli made a break for it. "Damn it!" Marek pushed through the agony searing his chest and went after him. "Kill the Wraith! Free her soul!" Escher's plan was solid, but killing Eli meant destroying their chance to get information from him, intel that might prove vital in the fight ahead. Eli gave him a better reason not to kill him when he caught the bastard. "I might have taken her soul, but I gave it to another, made him the owner of it, and you will never find it. I will make sure of that." Eli spat and stopped running, and turned to face Marek. Plan A it was, then. Capturing him. He just needed Diamond to keep Escher under control for a few seconds more, and he would be on the demon, taking him down. Eli kept perfectly still as Marek sprinted towards him, and Marek wanted to grin. Eli did grin. "You took Lisabetta from me. I will keep your sister from you." Marek threw himself at Eli. Something hit him like a truck from the side, sending him crashing to the ground. He rolled into one of the low hedges and grunted as a fist struck his jaw, knocking his head into the dirt. Weight pressed down on him and he bucked it off, wanted to growl when he saw who it was. Guillaume. His eyes were bright violet. The bastard was a wraith, not a vampire. Marek twisted with him, pinning him beneath him as he rolled back onto the path and looked up at Eli. Dark purple and black smoke rapidly spread behind him. Eli stepped backwards towards it. Escher blazed past Marek on a collision course with the demon. Even with his other side at the helm, his brother was too slow, the effect of the wraith's blade taking its toll on him. Escher reached the portal just as it dissipated, disturbing the remaining smoke as he twisted in all directions, flashing fangs and snarling as he tried to find the wraith. His prey. Diamond slammed into him, taking him down. "Time to sleep." Escher lurched, attempting to buck Diamond off him, but Diamond pressed his hands to the sides of Escher's head. Escher's struggles slowed as frost glittered over Diamond's hands, his skin paling as their brother's ability took effect, the cold sapping his strength. This time Diamond broke away before he went too far, leaving Escher breathing softly and slowly as he shuddered, racked with shivers. Diamond looked across at Marek, sorrow crossing his features. It echoed in Marek, too, but he refused to lose hope. He was sure that whoever Eli had given Calendria's soul to was involved in this plot, too. They would have their shot at the bastard and the wraith, and they would kill both of them, once they knew how to find Calendria's soul. He looked across at Katerina where she knelt in the middle of the path, holding herself as sweat dotted her brow and she trembled, shaking violently. But for now, he had a demon to take care of. Chapter 35. Katerina was too weak to fight Marek as he scooped her onto her feet, wrapped an arm around her ribs, and walked her towards her brother. Guillaume hissed and snapped fangs at Marek's white-haired brother, earning a glare from him that had his eyes turning glacial, like a winter storm. She trudged along beside Marek, heart growing heavier with each step, as the look he had given her and what he had said to Eli ran around her head. She was a demon. What did he want with a demon? She swallowed hard as an answer came to her. Information. She was sure that it was the only reason she was alive now, being led towards her brother. Marek wanted information from her. She had seen another of the Wraith's safe houses. There was a chance she could explain to him where to find it. Would that be enough to buy her freedom? She couldn't teleport him there, not with whatever Eli had carved into her forehead still active. The white-haired god towering over her brother grew bored of his constant threatening, and she flinched as he placed a gloved hand on Guillem's head. He paled and slumped to the ground, out cold just like Escher. "I can take them, Diamond." Marek stopped at Escher's booted feet. Diamond glanced down at Escher, a wealth of love in his eyes, conflict that told her how deeply he wanted to be the one to take care of their brother. "You're weak. You can't teleport him in your condition. I'll make it quick." Diamond crouched beside Escher, hovering a hand over his arm, and looked up at Marek as if waiting for permission. The moment Marek nodded, Diamond laid a hand on Escher and they were gone, only wisps of black smoke left behind them. Marek tugged her to her brother, stooped and did the same, teleporting the moment he made contact with Guillem. The black whirled around them, her head twirling with it, stomach rebelling as she squeezed her eyes shut, and tried to endure the effect of the teleport as it ravaged her tired, aching body. When they landed, she kept her eyes closed, waiting for the spinning to slow before she dared risk opening them. "Take him to the castle." Marek's deep voice curled around her, and the ache inside her worsened because she still found it comforting. "Sure," Valen answered, and in the background she heard Marek's other brothers. "I cannot believe he would do such a reckless thing." Karis sounded close to snapping at someone. Marek? Was he angry because Marek had brought her to this place, their sanctuary? She opened her eyes, instinct pushing her to react, to defend him even when she knew it wouldn't help him or make a difference. A flash of his cold eyes danced across her mind, his words still echoing in her ears. She was a demon. When she looked at Karis, she found him gazing down at Escher where he rested in his arms, cradled against his chest. "Megan, Ares, I will need your help. If what Diamond has said is true, Escher's other side is in control. We need to make sure he cannot teleport when he comes around." Karis's green eyes flooded with concern. The entire room fell silent and the tension in the air rose to an unbearable degree. Katerina looked at Escher. Were they going to carve a ward on him like the one Eli had placed on her? Ares' voice was gruff as he said, "He won't be happy if he comes around in the cage." A cage? They meant to place their own brother in a cell? Like the one they had placed her in? She looked at everyone, taking in their grim faces, and it struck her that this cell they spoke of was far worse than the one she had been held in. Marek sighed. "I agree with Karis. I don't want to do this to him either, but Escher was close to losing control. He turned against me, almost killed me with his powers." That had everyone staring at Marek, and Katerina squirmed as more than one of them leveled a black look on her. "I'm sorry," Marek continued. "We lost Lizabeta and Eli escaped, but we can still get information from our prisoner." She squirmed even harder as those words left his lips. Their prisoner. Her. A pretty petite woman with black pigtails fussed over Escher, worry written in every line of her face. Katerina looked away, unable to bear seeing the love she held for Escher, not when her own heart was breaking. Her eyes fell on Guillem, where Valen was hauling his dead weight into his arms as if he weighed nothing. The heart that was already aching in her chest burned deeper, the pain spreading through her as she gazed at her brother, despair mounting inside her. She hadn't meant to hurt him, had only ever wanted to help him. She loved him with all of her heart, even though he had broken it. She wasn't sure anything could ever stop her from loving him. He had betrayed her, had hurt her, but still she couldn't quell the love she had for him. He was her brother. She closed her eyes again. He had been her brother. Now he despised her, was an agent of evil, a member of Eli's forces. If she had been more supportive of him, if she had listened to him rather than trying to impose what she wanted on him, would he have still been her brother? Would he still love her? Marek's fingers flexed against her arm, drawing her back to him. She opened her eyes and looked at them where they pressed into her dirty skin, her heart sinking lower as dread mingled with despair inside her. "Are you going to take me to the castle too?" she whispered, unable to get her voice above a murmur. Marek's gaze landed on her. "Do you want to go with your brother?" She shook her head. She didn't want to go back to that cell, and she didn't want to be near Guillem, not right now. It hurt too much. She needed time to come to terms with everything, and then maybe she would be strong enough to face her brother, although she wasn't sure that time was something she had. "Why do you want to go to the castle, then?" His fingers flexed against her arm, almost a caress. She wanted to cry and rip her arm from his grip, but wanted to lean into him at the same time, stealing every moment of contact between them. "Because I'm your prisoner too." She lifted her gaze enough to land on the deep lacerations that cut across his broad chest as he turned towards her, but wasn't brave enough to risk going any higher. When Escher had attacked him, she had been terrified, had thought she was going to lose him. She had lost him. She knew that deep in her heart, and it was the reason she couldn't bring her eyes up to meet his. She was bone-deep afraid of what she would see in them. She wanted to see warmth in them again, love, but all she would see was hate. No. That word held force, enough that his brother with the blonde ponytail stopped talking to Diamond and looked across at them. She squirmed under his scrutiny, aware of what she was, how wretched she had to be in their eyes. She wanted to believe that Marek's answer had meant she wasn't their prisoner, but she was tired and refused to let herself read into things, finding meanings in his words that weren't true, just because she didn't want to part from him. "Will you take me home then?" She inched her gaze higher to his collarbones. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, luring her eyes higher still. "No." He paused, and his deep voice held a regretful edge to it when he said, "I can't do that." Cold slid down her spine. Her mind went blank. And then a single question spun in it. "Are you going to kill me?" She blurted, and her eyes leaped to his. She had been ready to accept death just hours ago, but now she was afraid of it. She wanted to live even when she knew it would be a struggle to go on alone in this world. Marek's right eyebrow hiked up. "You have some weird and wild ideas." His eyebrows dipped low, narrowing his rich brown eyes. "I'm not going to kill you. I'm taking you with me." "Where?" If he wasn't taking her to the castle and he wasn't taking her home, where did he intend to go with her? His answer hit her hard, had that dread pooling deeper inside her until she felt as if she might drown in it. "The underworld." Her eyes widened and she backed off a step, but he tightened his grip, stopping her from escaping. "So your father can kill me?" She searched his eyes, hers leaping between them as her heart raced. She tried to call on her power to see emotions, but it refused to come, leaving her in the dark and increasing the panic that swept through her on tingling waves. "Good gods, no!" He barked and scowled, his earthy eyes revealing how deeply she was offending him, and annoying him apparently. She didn't need to be able to see his emotional aura to see that. It wasn't her fault. She didn't know what was happening or what to think, and he wasn't exactly being clear with her. They had carted her brother away. She was a demon. It wasn't unreasonable that she expected the same treatment, but Marek looked as if she was being just that. His handsome features softened as he gentled his grip. "I'm taking you there so Mother can check you over. I want to know if you really are a demon now." That wasn't really a comfort. What happened when Persephone announced she was a demon and it was irreversible? Were they going to have this conversation again with far different answers? Marek shifted his gaze to the blonde with the ponytail. "Cal, I know what your favor Mark does." Shock danced in Cal's blue eyes. "It's no secret." Marek led her over to his brother. "I need a portal to the underworld for 2. "It's not easy, you know." Cal frowned at him. "A portal for just you isn't a problem, but a portal for you and her? That's pushing it. I'm not sure I have enough strength to cast that." The world suddenly went black, and then her feet hit onyx dirt. Marek stared straight ahead, surprise lighting his eyes. Evidently, this wasn't how Cal's portal worked, which meant they had been summoned again, and that had more ice inching down her spine. That dark, malevolent power she had felt during their last visit to the underworld washed over her, fiercer this time. It pressed down on her, had her legs weakening beneath her as she tried to fight it and remain standing. Marek palmed her arm, his grip on her tightening again as he pulled her closer to him. He wrapped his arm around her, supporting her, a flicker of what might have been concern in his eyes as she struggled against the oppressive weight of that power. Hades. She didn't need to look to know he was standing on the steps of the enormous black Grecian temple. She could feel him there, could sense him as a dark presence, one that had her wanting to run in the other direction, as far from him as her wobbly legs would carry her. Warmth spread upwards from her feet, chasing away the cold that washed through her. She felt Persephone's presence before the goddess came into view, circling her long black robes brushing the ground, parting to reveal her bare feet. Wherever she stepped, green stems curled from the ground and budded, bloomed into colorful flowers, a carpet of them that separated her from the bleak earth as she came to a halt in front of Katerina, between her and Hades. Persephone's soft green eyes held hers, and Katerina felt as if the goddess was reaching into her. Her blood writhed in response, nausea rolling through her as Persephone slowly approached her and lifted her hand. She meant to touch her. Katerina recoiled on instinct, but Marek was there, a solid wall at her back. His hands came down on her shoulders, holding her in place as the goddess closed the distance between them down to only inches. Katerina flinched away when Persephone's hand neared her, and melted against Marek's chest when her palm landed on Katerina's forehead. Warmth spread outwards from her touch, the weird heavy feeling that had been a constant presence on her brow since Eli had carved the symbol on it, lifting. A nasty mark. Persephone stroked fingers across Katerina's brow, and Katerina's head grew hazy, strangely light. Is that better? She nodded in a daze. Why is she here again? Hades' voice boomed from the temple, shattering the calming warmth. Marek's grip on her tightened, and he drew her closer to his chest. Afraid his father would do as she had expected and kill her? She shoved that feeling out of her head and her heart, refusing to believe it. I think Hades cut her off. It dares to speak in my presence? Persephone sighed, and even that was gentle and soft, but somehow managed to relay her irritation. Katerina is not an it, my love. Persephone's emerald eyes remained fixed on Katerina's. She lowered her hand to Katerina's cheek and then her chest, settling it over her heart. Her eyes brightened and the flowers that bloomed around her withered. Katerina's hope died with them. I know what you're going to say. She shook her head, not wanting to hear it. It's fine, really. Marek palmed her shoulders and she tensed, wanting to beg him not to let go of her. He released her, and cold immediately rolled across her back in a frigid wave as he broke contact with her. She looked down at her feet, at the dead blooms, feeling as if she was withering inside too. Could she teleport away from here now that Mark was gone? She wanted to escape, before Marek broke her heart. Deal with her. Hades' black demand had that need to flee rising faster. She took a step back. Marek seized her arm. Don't run. Because it would only make it harder for him to kill her? Her eyes leaped up to his, and she braced herself, sure she would see that cold look in them again. But there was only warmth. She didn't understand. I'm a demon, she whispered. I know it. I can feel it. You can feel it. She needed to hear him admit that he knew what she was, and that whatever foolish thoughts were beginning to creep into her mind and her heart, they were wrong. His family despised demons. It was his duty to kill them, and his father had just issued an order. He looked her over, his gaze gaining an almost clinical edge to it as he studied every inch of her. Shock rippled through her when he lifted his hand and gently stroked her cheek. You don't feel like a demon. He brushed her hair back, clearing it from her face, his gaze sincere. But I am one. She felt the need to lean into his soft touch and couldn't stop her mouth from moving, spilling words that she used as a shield around her heart and an attempt to provoke a reaction, something that would give her a clear sign of what her future held. I'm a demon, in the underworld. I think your father just gave you an order. And I will obey it. He palmed her cheek, his touch painfully gentle, threatening to draw tears from her. Son. Persephone's voice carried around them like a light warming breeze. Carry out your duty. He nodded. Katerina braced herself, squeezed her eyes shut, waited. Nothing happened. And then Marek tilted her head up and kissed her. Hades growled. Persephone made a small, gleeful sound. I win. Amusement and victory laced those two words as they left Persephone's lips. First duty always trumps the second. It is your blood in his veins, after all. Another, lower and darker growl sounded from the direction of the temple, and then a huff. Marek didn't stop kissing her, and Katerina felt as if she was spinning as she struggled to catch up, her mind swimming with confusion. When Marek finally released her lips, but not the rest of her, keeping her pinned against his chest, she opened her eyes and stared at her surroundings. They were back where they had been, standing in the middle of the Japanese mansion. "What did your mother mean?" She lifted her eyes to meet Marek's, and the warmth in them hit her hard, curled around her and eased some of the fear from her heart. "First duty beats second, or something like that. What's the first duty?" "First duty is to our heart. Mother's rules." Marek brushed his knuckles over her cheek. "What does that mean?" A shiver raced over her arms, and she didn't dare believe it meant what she thought it did. "It means that I'm picking you. I'll always pick you over the duty my father gave to me." He kissed her again, and her head spun, thoughts racing as she tried to make that sink in. For a moment, she had thought she had lost everything. Discovering that she hadn't, that she wasn't going to be alone in this world, and that Marek wasn't going to turn his back on her was too much. It overwhelmed her. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him, relishing the way he banded one arm around her back, tucked the other beneath her backside, and lifted her, so their faces were level, so she could kiss him deeper. Deu, it felt good to be held by him like this. It felt right. She wanted this forever, even when she feared it wasn't possible, was afraid that one day he would wake up to what she was and he would leave her. His brothers were watching them, and none of them were saying a word now. But what about when she wasn't here? What if they secretly hated her, poisoned Marek against her? Marek murmured against her lips, "You think too loud. It's never going to happen." "How do you know that?" She pressed her cheek to his as he peppered her face with kisses. As he held her closer still, making her feel as if she wasn't the only one who wanted to hold on to the other forever. He whispered the sweetest words she had ever heard in his ear, ones that stole her heart and made everything right. Perfect. "Because I love you." Chapter 36. Insects buzzed, filling the thick, hot air with their song. Birds chirped as they darted between the olive trees that surrounded Marek's villa, seeking the shade and relief from the afternoon heat. That heat seeped deep into Marek's bones, caressed his bare chest and lower legs, soaking into his black shorts, as comforting as the feel of the hand that gently clutched his left one. He tucked his right hand behind his head, propping himself up on the wooden recliner so he could see Katerina. She lay beside him on her own recliner, tucked in the shade of the ribbed terracotta roof that extended out over the patio, covering the dining area that overlooked the valley. Strands of her spun caramel hair had come loose from the twisted knot at the back of her head, caressed her cheek in ways he wanted to imitate, but he didn't want to disturb her. Karis had sent them away from Tokyo with strict orders to rest after they had held a meeting, insisting that he would cover Paris and Seville while Marek recovered. Valen had offered to take care of London and Rome, giving Cal a chance to recoup his strength too. Diamond was covering Tokyo and Hong Kong, although Escher was apparently fine again now, back on his feet and grumpy if the weather everyone had experienced in their cities a few days back was anything to go by. The rain had been so heavy it had almost caused a flood in Marek's valley, and when Katerina had realized it was caused by Escher, she had begged Marek to speak to him. The fact that she feared Escher didn't sit well with Marek. He had gone to see his brother in person, and rather than giving him a verbal beating for scaring her and making her think it was because she was a demon and he hated her, he had ended up talking Escher down. His brother had felt everyone was angry with him for not summoning them to help with their enemy at the main Seville gate. They had been at first, but as always, that anger had quickly faded, because as testing as he could be, everyone understood Escher and his reasons for doing the things he did. Although, if he so much as looked at Katerina wrong, he was going to get a beating from Marek. She was still finding it hard to believe he wanted to be with her, mentioning several times a day that she was a demon. The most recent had been this morning when she had dropped a mug during another episode and had cut herself on the pieces. She had seen how dark her blood was now, verging on black, and had lashed out at him when he had tried to help her. He had weathered her blows, letting her get it all out because he knew how hard this was for her. It was hard for him, too. Not because she was a demon. but because he hated seeing her hurting. He hated feeling powerless to help her. He had swept her into his arms, kissed her, and carried her out onto the patio into the sunlight, proving that she wasn't entirely demon. He wasn't sure what she was yet, but he would rather call her a hybrid. She was still human with some human limitations, but she was part demon too. A fact she had proven last night by suddenly sprouting fangs, which had made dinner interesting. She had panicked so hard she had fallen backwards off her chair and almost tumbled down the hill on the other side of the patio. Marek had calmed her by showing her his own fangs, and it had gone down well with her. He smiled and brushed his thumb across her fingers. He liked having something in common, too. They could both teleport. They both had fangs. They both still loved hunting vampires. Although Karis had ripped him a new one about that little penchant of his. He planned to dial it back and see if he could cope with no longer hunting vampires. He stared at Katerina, feeling as if he could now that she was his and had made him realize his past was just that. It was over. Now he had a future to look forward to, and someone who loved him as much as he loved her. Tonight he had intended to take her out to the city, to stroll around it and maybe test some of her abilities. She had been practicing with them, and could teleport half of the time she attempted it now, and had managed to form a barrier a few times as well. After their date, he had planned to take her to see her brother. His brothers had tried to get information out of their captive, but Guillaume was proving to be as stubborn as his sister. The Wraith wasn't being cooperative at all, so 2 days ago, Karis had visited to ask Katerina to attempt to get her brother to talk. Katerina had been reluctant to agree to it, and Marek knew why. She felt guilty about her part in what had happened, ashamed that she had driven Guillaume to turn on her and side with their enemy, and hurt that her brother had changed so dramatically. Marek didn't think the change had been as dramatic as she imagined, or that all hope was lost. He had seen Guillaume hesitate. There was a chance she could reach her brother. That feeling had strengthened when she had agreed and he had taken her to see Guillaume. Rather than being motionless and distant, he had reacted in an instant to the sight of her, and Marek had caught the brief flare of relief in his eyes before he had shut down his feelings. During their last few visits, Katerina had managed to get a handful of words out of her brother by talking about their past and happier times. Guillaume hadn't offered any information yet, but Marek was confident that he would soon, if Katerina was allowed to keep rebuilding their relationship and reminding him of better days, and that she still loved him. She had talked about getting some photographs from her home in Barcelona to take with her to their next meeting with Guillaume, and Marek had wanted to see how the male would react. Karis had called a meeting, though. His brother wanted reports. Marek didn't really have much to offer, unless his brother wanted to know how Katerina was doing, and how much he loved her. He gazed at her, every inch of him aware of her. He loved her with every fiber of his being, to the depths of his soul and with all of his heart. He had thought what he had felt for Erlia had been love, but it was a shadow of what he felt for Katerina. She stirred his blood, the dark, possessive, and protective side of him, and roused a fierce need inside him, one he knew would never die. She was perfect for him, too, an invaluable partner. It wasn't just how well they fought together that had him feeling they had been made for one another. She had revealed another side of herself when she had found him in his office one morning and had insisted she help him. It turned out that she loved researching as much as he did, which was a major turn-on. He shifted, trying to get comfortable as his shorts pinched. They had spent most of the time they hadn't been practicing with her powers deep in research mode, uncovering everything they could about wraiths and the gates, and hunting for a possible connection between the demons and Hellspawn. He hadn't dared to take her back to the mansion since she had developed one ability he wished she didn't have. He had wanted her to spend time with his brothers now that everyone had confirmed they had no problem with her and she didn't trigger their darker sides, just as she didn't trigger his. She didn't feel like a demon to them either. He had been quick to change his mind about her attending meetings when they had landed in the mansion only for every single one of them to look at her with hunger in their eyes. Even Karis. It turned out she had inherited more than just the ability to see emotions and cast barriers from the succubus. She could emit a sort of pheromone, too, one that messed with his brothers. When he had asked her why it was happening, she had admitted with a blush she had been thinking about him. He had wanted to kiss her for that, But he had also wanted to get her the hell away from his brothers. Valen had seconded that, labeling it as disgusting and gross. None of his brothers wanted to know when she was thinking dirty things about Marek, apparently. Marek didn't want them to know either. So he had been training her, trying to get her to master her ability, which had ended with several serious makeout sessions. The sun disappeared behind the horizon. Katerina's nose wrinkled. Her lashes fluttered, and then her eyes opened, sleepy hazel depths locking with his. She smiled, rolled onto her back, and stretched like a cat, stirring his blood. I was having a wonderful dream. A hint of crimson colored her cheeks. Maybe that need stirring in his blood was courtesy of her. It was hard to tell when he wanted her every time he looked at her, ached for her if they were apart for even just a few minutes. You're adapting well to sleeping throughout the day. He rolled onto his side to face her. It's not hard when my body wants it. He groaned. My body wants something. She grinned, pushed him onto his back, and mounted him, tearing another moan from him as she settled back on him, her tiny black shorts and crop tank doing him in, flashing far too much skin. He skimmed his hands up her bare thighs. We have a meeting tonight. She pouted, pressed her palms to his chest, and leaned over him, giving him a view down her top, rousing that heat until it licked at him like fire, had him shifting his hands to her backside and holding her in place as he ground his hips against her. Sparks lit her hazel irises. I wanted to reenact my dream. Marek tipped his head back into the padded seat and frowned as he groaned. We can do that. I'm not taking you anywhere near my brothers when you want me. I might kill them. Oh, well, if it will stop you from doing that. She leaned over and kissed him. He lifted his head, craning his neck, and claimed her mouth, seizing control of the kiss as he clutched her backside. Frigid cold washed over him. Do you know there's a demon on your lap? That haughty female voice dampened his libido and had Katerina scooting backwards. Marek tightened his grip on her hips, stopping her from escaping, and she tensed. He eased her down so she was lying beside him, her left leg mercifully draped over his hips, concealing the evidence of his arousal from the goddess towering over him. What do you want so badly that you're wrecking my personal time? Marek looked up at her into her pale green eyes. Enyo preened the glossy twisted braids of her black hair, frowned and dabbed at a splotch of crimson on her left cheek. She brought her fingers away from her and frowned at them. It wasn't the only blood on her. There were streaks of it all over her black and silver armor, too. I heard what happened with the gate. Enyo wiped her fingers on her cloak. Katerina gave him a look. One Marek heated like a sensible male. This is Enyo, goddess of war, sister of the real Ares, not my brother. He turned his gaze on the goddess again. Look, I have a fantastic idea. Karis asked me to ask you if you have any new information for us. We could cut out the middleman and you could just talk to my brother yourself. That cold swirling around him turned glacial and she glared down at him. Doesn't she like Karis? Katerina whispered as she curled closer to him. Something like that, he muttered. The goddess didn't disappear as expected. She lingered, the black look on her face fading into one of concern. How is... He fought... Enyo took a breath, looked as if she wanted to finish one of those sentences, and averted her gaze instead. He's fine. Marek wanted to say more than that, wanted to tell her that he was beginning to suspect something was seriously wrong with his brother, but he also didn't want Karis to make another attempt at killing him. Once a century was enough for Marek. Last time he had been lucky in a way, and the gate had taken the hit for him. We need information, Enyo. The night we had to seal the gate, it wanted to be opened. We all know that gate is off limits. Have you asked Hades about it? No, and that isn't going to happen. I can't bring up Calindria, not until we're sure we can get her soul back. Marek sagged against the seat and blew out his breath. I don't know how possible that is, though. The Wraith said he gave her soul to someone else, passing ownership of it to them. Enyo stiffened. What is it? Marek sat up, moving Katerina onto his lap as he got the feeling the goddess knew something. Transferring ownership of a soul would be complicated. The new master would need to be more powerful than the previous one. A creature capable of holding and controlling a soul, and that narrows it down to one species. Marek felt as if he couldn't breathe. He told himself not to pin any hopes on this information, that it might turn out Enyo was wrong, but he couldn't help himself. She was a goddess 3 times his age, who had been everywhere and seen everything. Her position as a goddess of war meant she had spent most of her life honing her knowledge of every species. If she could only think of one species, then that had to be the one they were looking for. She hesitated, sent a chill through him when she finally spoke. Not a demon. I might be wrong, Marek. It is possible. I would need to look into it. Tell me what species, Enyo. I can research too. I have to do something, even if it turns out to be another dead end. I need to give my brothers some hope. Being able to tell them even just the name of a species capable of doing what the Wraith had said would keep their spirits up. It would keep them strong. It might also help us arm ourselves against the next threat. We all suspect whoever has her soul is involved in this plot against this world and our own. That had the goddess relenting, concern flittering across her face as she toyed with her braids again. I have not seen one in centuries, but once I met a descendant of a god of the underworld your family knows well, Thanatos, the god of death who had helped his father crush the rebellions. Thanatos bred, seeding a demigod offspring who inherited some of his powers. In turn, that demigod created an entire breed of hellspawn. Enyo's jade eyes gained a glimmer of worry. As I said, I have not seen one in many years, perhaps even before Callistos and Calindria were born. It is entirely possible I am wrong, but if I am not, Marek, you all need to be on your guard. A shiver spread down his arms and over his thighs, the graveness of her words and the concern in her eyes filling him with a sense of dread far worse than what he had experienced that day in the shower. This one ran soul deep. He stared at Enyo, needing her to say it, because he wouldn't believe the word running around his mind until she spoke it aloud, confirming his suspicions. Necromancers are dangerous, Marek. Never trust one. Never. They are nefarious, devious creatures, driven by a powerful need to harvest souls. He felt Katerina's gaze on him, but he couldn't bring himself to look at her as he absorbed that. What little he knew about the elusive and rare breed of hellspawn flying around his mind. That required some serious research, and he needed to tell his brothers. I must go. Enyo pressed a hand to her chest. Brother is calling. He will be furious I slipped away from the battle while he was occupied. Marek nodded. Any information you can give me about this breed would be appreciated, Enyo. She dipped her chin and disappeared, leaving a trail of white-blue smoke where she had been. I don't like her, Katerina muttered. Marek wrapped his arms around her and kissed her cheek as she glared at the vapor trail. I am not interested in Enyo. She is a pain in my backside. Every time she visits me to help us, Karis ends up furious with me. Because they hate each other? Katerina finally looked at him right into his eyes. Quite the contrary, I think. So why doesn't she go to see him? He's the leader. Katerina frowned at him, all the fires of the underworld in her eyes. I don't like her hanging around you. Someone is jealous. He pressed a kiss to her lips, a brief one that only served to reignite the fire in his veins, and remind him what they had been doing before Enyo had crashed their private party. There's history there. They haven't seen each other since Karis left the underworld. I don't know why, but neither of them seems inclined to see each other. Katerina glanced back to where the goddess had stood. That's odd. She was clearly worried about Karis. I would go as far as saying she was interested in him in an emotional and physical way, judging by her aura. I caught flares of pink and red. I figured out those colors together reveals desire. Katerina grinned cheekily. I can't blame her. He is a looker. Marek scowled at her. I don't want to talk about my brother anymore, or I'll be the one getting jealous. What he wanted to do was step inside with her and make love with her, but he needed to talk to his brothers about what he had just learned to make sure they would be on guard around the hellspawn they encountered at the gates. He teleported Katerina inside, but set her down in the bedroom and tossed her jeans and a t-shirt at her. She dressed without fuss, casually removing her tank and shorts. inflaming him without even trying as he paused to watch her.
Stop it, or I will get kicked out of your family home again.
She pinned him with a look.
It's hard enough controlling myself right now. I don't need you giving me the come-get-me eyes.
He tamped down his needs because fitting in with his family meant a lot to her, and she was making progress, beginning to feel as if she could be a part of it. He didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that. He wanted his brothers to accept and include her. He threw on his black linens and a gray shirt and didn't bother with shoes. Katerina remained barefoot, too. He crossed the room to her, pulled her into his arms, and teleported. He would have to send a message to the others, calling them to the meeting early. When the darkness dissipated to reveal the TV area of the Tokyo mansion, he scrubbed that thought. His brothers lounged on the cream couches, watching Valen and Escher racing each other in some video game on the enormous flat-screen television. Eva and Aiko were cheering them on, squeezed next to them at either end of the couch. On the one that stood with its back to Marek, Diamond muttered something to Aries, and Megan laughed. Karis rose from the seat on the other side of Diamond nearest the television and turned to look at Marek. His brother's green irises darkened, blackening around the edges. He knew Ennio had visited him. Marek waited for the fallout as his brother held up his hand and the TV switched off, drawing everyone's focus to Marek. Did something happen? The storm that had been building in Karis's eyes abated. Did she have new information? Marek nodded. Everyone stood now, and he frowned as he spotted one of his brothers was missing. He looked at Karis. I thought it best Callistos remained at the gate for this meeting, because I wanted to discuss what the Wraith told you. Marek was glad his brother hadn't included Cal. He didn't like keeping things from their youngest brother, but he also didn't want to hurt him. There was always a danger that hearing them talk about Calindria would be too hard on him and would cause an episode. And right now, Cal was more susceptible to his affliction than ever. Sealing the gate had taken more than a physical toll on Callistos. That gate had represented their sister, had been bound to her before her death, forged with her blood. Losing it was like losing her all over again, or losing all hope of saving her. Marek pushed that thought from his head and faced his brothers, because there was hope. Ennio believes the only breed powerful enough to take ownership of Calindria's soul is one straight out of the underworld, born of Thanatos. Karis's black eyebrows lowered. A necromancer? Marek nodded and looked at each of his brothers. A hellspawn. Shit. Valen tossed the controller on the couch. Suddenly I don't feel like playing anymore. Neither did Marek. It felt as if they had all been playing, not treating this as if it was a game, but not taking it entirely seriously. Demons were weaker than they were, and could be defeated. They had proven that with the illusionist and the Valkyrie, and the incubus and succubus, and had almost taken down the Wraith, too. The power of a demon was no match for them, not if they worked together. But the power of a hellspawn, and a breed that used harnessed souls to feed its strength, one that drew power from death, that wasn't good. For all they knew, they had been feeding the hellspawn by killing the demons, making it stronger, a formidable foe that was going to prove a challenge. And what if it didn't stop there? What if more than hellspawn were involved in this? We have a lead to go on, Karis said, pulling him out of his thoughts. Look into this breed. I will help with whatever information I can give you. I met one once, so we have that to our advantage. We'll have to be on guard at the gates. Diamond looked at Megan and Aries. You be extra careful. Aries nodded. You know me. I'm always careful. Valen snorted at that. We'll get Calindria's soul back, one way or another. We'll turn over every damned rock until we find where the Wraith is hiding. I'll scout any locations with you, places he might have been. Escher stepped out from behind Valen.
I'll help.
Katerina didn't shrink back when everyone looked at her. She stood by Marek's side, her chin tipped up and resolve in her hazel eyes.
He took me to a different mansion. A lot of demons were there. It'll be a good place to start. And I'll try to get through to Guillaume, too, and see what he knows. I think he'll start talking to me soon. I just need a little more time.
Everyone murmured in agreement. The hope that had been leaching from him grew again, filling his heart as he looked at his brothers, and they all started talking, discussing what they would do next, forming a plan, working together to face this rising threat. Marek ushered Katerina over to them where they formed a wall, shoulder to shoulder. As his brothers included her in the conversation, and Megan, Iko, and Eva joined in, Marek looked off to his left, over her head to the opened screens and the garden beyond it. The sky turned crimson, smoke billowing across it, but no shrieks reached his ears, and some of the buildings he could see were no longer crumbling and in ruins. The other world was stable, possibly even improved. They had taken a knock by losing Calendria's gate, but sealing it and taking out the illusionist had reversed some of the damage done to the other world. He slipped his arm around Katerina's shoulders and tucked her against his side as he turned back to his brothers, and smiled as she wrapped her arm around his waist. The stakes were getting higher, but whatever the enemy was going to throw at them, they could take it. Their team was growing stronger as the enemies grew weaker. He looked at Katerina. She was part of this fight now, like Megan, Eva, and Iko, and he knew that, like them, she wouldn't be sitting on the sidelines during this war. She would be right there in the thick of it, fighting at his side, watching his back as he watched hers. Together, they would make it through whatever fate had to throw at them, because there was no one in his world more perfect for him, and no one he loved more. Katerina lifted her head and looked up at him, her hazel eyes meeting his, reflecting the love that beat in his heart, a heart that beat for her. She smiled, tiptoed, and whispered against his mouth. "You think too loud." She brushed her lips across his in a brief kiss. "Or maybe that's my thoughts echoing in your head." The black looks his brothers leveled on him said the thoughts in her head were nothing but wicked. Marek wrapped her in his arms and stepped, because he was damned if he was going to let her near his brothers or let his brothers near her when she was projecting her feelings. The darker part of him growled as he claimed her mouth in a fierce kiss. She was his and his alone, and he was hers. Forever. The end. This has been Marek, Guardians of Hades Romance Series, Book 4, written by Felicity Heaton and narrated by Eric G. Dove. Copyright 2020 by Felicity Heaton. Production copyright 2020 by Felicity Heaton.